Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto gets banished, moves to the west, becomes leader of an empire, and bashes Konoha part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Naruto swore to himself as he all but stormed down the road towards his home, fist clenched so hard that his fingernails had torn the skin, the blood dripping from his knuckles with each step. His world had just been turned upside down in the worst way possible. Flashback. Naruto followed the Anbu cat into the council chambers. "Thank you, cat. That will be all," Homura said from his position next to the empty Hokage chair. "Where is Tsunade-bachan?" Naruto asked, eyebrow raised. "Or anyone from the Shinobi Council for that matter." "Silence," one of the civilians shouted. "No, you be silent," Tsunade growled, smashing open the council doors. "I want to know why neither I nor the Shinobi Council has been summoned to this." Behind her, the Shinobi Council filed in, glaring at the elders. "You would have been biased towards the demon." The unfortunate civilian council member was immediately detained by Tsunade's Anbu. "Tsunade, restrain yourself," Koharu called, only for Tsunade to snarl at her. "You shut the fuck up. All of you." At that, the elders and the civilian council snapped their mouths shut. "Now, before the debriefing begins, let me make myself clear. I am Hokage. Not you. If you don't like this, consider vacating your council seat for someone with an actual brain." The civilians clicked their tongues but remained quiet. "Now, Genin Uzumaki, please inform us on everything that has happened during your battle with Uchiha Sasuke at the Valley of the End, as well as your perspective on the events leading up to your battle," Tsunade said. Naruto nodded and began to recount the events from his perspective from the moment he and the Sasuke retrieval squad left the gates, the encounters with the Sound 4, him catching up to Sasuke at the Valley of the End. He paused, gathering his thoughts and memories. Then he began talking about his fight with Sasuke, mentioning clearly that he was not trying to kill Sasuke. He ended with how he managed to overpower Sasuke, rendering him unconscious, and how he was busy carrying him back when Kakashi found them. At that point, he lost consciousness. Unseen by everyone, Danzo was activating his stolen Sharingan and subtly began influencing the civilians, his fellow elders and a few of the shinobi, altering what they heard ever so slightly that even if Inoichi should mind delve them, he wouldn't find anything out of place. "So, in other words, you caused undue injury to Uchiha-sama?" Haruno Mabuki asked. "Surely you should have been able to bring Uchiha-sama back without having to rely on your tenant." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "When did I ever say that I used its chakra?" he asked. "Oh please, you don't stand a chance against Uchiha-sama otherwise, and probably forced him to use the power of the cursed seal," another civilian council member said. "No." Naruto began, but was interrupted by another civilian council member. "How can we trust your words if you willingly bow to using its power?" Naruto was normally pretty calm, but these false accusations was going on his nerves. He was interrupted again. "I wouldn't be surprised if it has been controlling this time," Tsunade interrupted the civilian council. "You be quiet. Naruto, please continue what you were about to say," Tsunade said, sending the civilian council a withering glare, daring them to say something. "Thanks, Bachan," Naruto said. "I did not use the Kyuubi's power until after Sasuke began using the power of the cursed seal." "Lies. You are doubtlessly under its control." The comment by Homura caused Naruto to snap. He punched him in the face. None of the active shinobi in the room could blame Naruto, however, they knew that Naruto had fallen for their trap. Danzo, the other elders and the civilians smirked in victory. "Anbu, take Uzumaki Naruto to prison on accounts of assaulting an elder," Danzo said. "Belay that," Tsunade ordered instantly. "Naruto, restrain yourself." "Fine." Naruto growled, arms returning to his side, though his hands were still curled into fists. "Hokage-sama, by law, Genin Uzumaki has to go to prison for assaulting Elder Homura," Koharu said smoothly. If that old fossil had actually tried, he could have dodged Naruto's punch without much effort. Tsunade scoffed. "Besides, it was you who was goading him into it." "Regardless, the fact of the matter is that he still assaulted Elder Homura," Danzo said. "However, if the council is so inclined, I may have another possible solution to this problem." Tsunade sighed, her concentration slipping just enough for Danzo to gain a precarious hold over her, a hold he wouldn't keep for long. "Naruto, would you leave us for the time being?" she asked. Naruto nodded and left the room, sending a glare at the elders and civilian council members. 13 minutes later, Naruto clenches his jaw when he heard what had just been decided. "Genin Uzumaki, registration number 012607. You have been found guilty of 1 count of aggravated assault on a fellow shinobi of the Leaf, assault on an elder, and endangering the lives of your team on your last mission through your actions. You are hereby banished from Konoha. You shall be given 24 hours to pack your things and leave Konoha grounds," Koharu said. Naruto's eyes widened in shock before he stormed out of the room. Flashback end. Slamming his door behind him, Naruto leaned his back against it as he let the tears flow. He cried because he felt betrayed. He cried because he would no longer fulfill his dream of becoming Hokage. He cried because he wouldn't keep his promise to his friends who believed that he would make it to Hokage. After what seemed like an eternity, though in reality was only around 20 minutes, he stopped crying, though he did not move from his position at the foot of the door. Eventually, he dozed off. Meanwhile, in the Hokage office. "Get the fuck out of my sight, you pathetic pieces of shit." Tsunade roared at the civilians who thought to push their paperwork on Tsunade. "And take your fucking paperwork with you and do it yourself." Followed by a string of curses and threats should she find any of their paperwork on her desk again. It was this that Hyuga Hiashi encountered upon arriving at the Hokage office. "Hokage-sama." He greeted her, earning a sharp "what now?" from Tsunade, though she calmed down when she recognized him. "Hiashi, what can I do for you?" she asked. "I need your help with something," he said, taking a seat in front of her. His face turned grim. "I do not believe that I have much time." Later, that evening, Naruto woke up when he heard and felt someone knocking on his door. Wiping his eyes with his sleeve, he turned to the door when, this time, he heard the knocking. "What do you want?" Naruto asked, opening the door. There stood the Anbu from earlier, Kat. "Uzumaki-san, Hokage-sama asked me to discreetly bring you to her office," she said, barely managing to keep her voice straight. She just felt bad for the kid, seeing him this down. "What does she want now?" he asked, shaking his head as he felt her hand on his shoulder. Arriving at Tsunade's office, he was met with the smell he had come to associate with the fifth Hokage. "Sake. You asked for me, Hokage-sama?" Naruto asked. He saw Tsunade flinch at his dead tone. "Yes, there is something that I need to give and tell you before you go," she said, standing up and walking over to the wall where Naruto knew she kept her stash of liquor. He may or may not have at one point swapped a random bottle out with one filled with oyster sauce some weeks ago. The look on her face was worth having the entirety of the Anbu force on his tail. To Naruto's surprise, she put her entire arm into the hidden compartment and he heard the distinct puff of a storage seal being opened. Tsunade turned around, holding a large shoebox-sized box in her hand. "In here you will find a letter from your parents, and no, I can't tell you who they are because I have made a promise to Sensei only to speak about them to you when you turn 16, in 3 years' time," she said. "I can however say this. They would be proud of you." Naruto numbly took the box, his frame beginning to shake. "If it were up to the council, then you wouldn't ever get this, but fuck them," Tsunade said before walking back to her desk and picking up a seemingly random scroll from the pile. "Here, take this as well." She handed him the scroll before leaning in. "You are not alone, Naruto. I will do what I can, but I fear that the elders will go behind my back to do some things. But remember, I will always have you in my heart. Thanks, Aba-chan," Naruto said as tears began to fall. Tsunade hugged him, then told Kat to bring him home so he can pack. After the two left, Tsunade summoned 2 more Anbu. "Tori, Seru. I have a mission for you," she said. Next morning, Naruto, with the help of Kat, Tori and Seru, managed to slip out of Konoha shortly after dusk, leaving a clone behind on their behest to draw off any pursuit. Now though he was alone, his escort having left to return to Konoha about an hour ago, the scroll Tsunade gave him told him to head over to a small village near the Land of Fire's capital. It said that there would be others who chose to join him. Judging by the speed at which he was traveling, Naruto estimated that he'd be there by dusk the next morning. 2. Suddenly, he received a rush of memories that made him stumble and plant his face in the dirt. "Ah, what the hell?" he said, wondering why he had memories of him being in Konoha after he left. "How could I have been in Konoha when all I left there was a shadow clone?" Naruto blinked a few times, a sense of enlightenment rushing over him. Suddenly he understood why he had memories, vague as they might be, of him beating up numerous people on missions when he was with his team most of the time. No way shadow clones send back their memories when they dispel. Naruto yelled out in surprise before cringing when he looked back into the memories of his clone. "Ouch, what the hell? Sakura, would you have to punch me there?" Naruto grabbed his still healing injury on his chest. Time skip. Naruto arrived at the outskirts of the village just as the sun was reaching the horizon. The inn he checked in was cheap, but at least gave a homely feeling, unlike some of the other inns he had stayed in, some of which felt outright sickening. The room had a bed, a small table and chair, a toilet and a small wardrobe. The most, it would seem bleak, but to Naruto, it was more than enough. After a simple dinner of rice, fish and vegetable soup, Naruto listened to the stories of the villagers as they spent the evening resting after a day's work. At night, Naruto fell asleep wondering what the future had in store for him. A week later, Naruto was busy repairing the roof of the inn to earn his stay and wait for these others that Tsunade spoke about. It was midday and he was sweating profusely after having replaced 50 tiles in the last 3 hours. It being summer did not help at all. "Menma, lunch is ready," the proprietor of the inn called up. Humming. Naruto called back. When he had checking a week ago, he had purposefully used an alias in order to draw off any attention. That and he had started wearing a mask like Kakashi does all the time to hide his most distinguishing feature. His whiskers. Thus far, only the proprietor, her husband and their 2 daughters had seen his face, and to his fake horror, the girls found out that he purrs when you stroke his whiskers. As he climbed down the ladder, he heard a snubby voice speak up behind him. "It isn't up to my family's standards, but for a countryside dweller like you I guess it is good enough." Naruto turned and sent a glare at the speaker, a young girl with dark brown hair and pale eyes, and a facial expression that strongly reminded him of Neji before he beat him during the Chunin exams. Hyuga. What is she doing here? Naruto thought. "I doubt you will find much better in a village such as this one, shrimp." Naruto said. "Most of your clan would head on straight to the capital since it is so close. How dare you? I am nobility and you are a mere commoner." She seethed. "And I could care why exactly?" Naruto asked. "It actually gives me more of a reason to hate you." The girl was taken aback. "Hate me?" she asked. "Yes. You are standing between me and my hard-earned lunch," Naruto said, crossing his arms but inwardly smiling at the expression the girl had on her face. Suddenly the girl became meek and mumbled an apology. If she had blushed, Naruto would have thought that she was related to Hinata. Walking into the inn, Naruto immediately walked into someone, sending the 2 of them to the floor. "Oni-sama." The girl from before shouted. "Watch where you are going, you stupid." "Oh, shut up will you, brat." Naruto ground out, rubbing his head which hit the head of the other person. "I'm sorry for walking into Naruto-kun." Naruto blinked and looked at the person. "Hinata?" he asked. "What are you doing here? Tsunade-sama hasn't told you?" She stammered. "I'm coming with you." Naruto blinked. Once. Twice. 3 times. Then, 7 years later, Western Empire, AN. Really need a name for this place. Suggestions. Naruto growled as he sat at the table, a literal mountain of paperwork next to him, waiting to be worked through. Damn, that Kurikumo making me the heir to the throne could have warned me about the paperwork before dying. Why did I accept again? These words, and many more were flowing from his mouth. His and the 5 other clones sitting at nearly identically packed desks around the room. Should not have beat up those thugs back then when his my luck ran out. Meanwhile, his secretary stood outside the room, sweat dropping and wondering if she should tell them that they were well ahead of schedule. Meanwhile, the real Naruto was in his private dining room, waiting for Hinata to bring out whatever wonder of the world she had cooked up for breakfast. "I am the luckiest man alive. I have a goddess as a wife, and she is absolutely the best at cooking," he said out loud, knowing full well that Hinata could hear him and what kind of effect it would have on her. "What, so you married me because I just make good food?" Hinata countered, though she smiled. It was their usual morning banter, and no hostile intentions were present at all. Pretty soon, Hinata came out of the kitchen carrying a tray of mouth-watering food such as pancakes, cinnamon rolls, fried rice amongst others. This was basically their early morning routine now. Naruto would wake up early, manage to make half a dozen shadow clones to begin working before Hinata grabs him and pulls him back to bed. An hour later he would wake up again to the smell of Hinata's cooking. They would then eat breakfast before heading over to the training field for an hour or 2 for their daily training. The day however would be different as one of the 2 people whom Naruto, Hinata and their 3rd companion encountered and subsequently joined their group knocked on the door. "Naruto. Hinata. There are a few people from Konoha here to see you," Karen said. Naruto groaned but stood up and headed to his wardrobe to get dressed. "And hurry up about it, you fool. Better be quiet or I'll disable your vocal cords again, Taiya-san." Their last companion, Nietzsche said. "Is it safe to come in, Hinata-sama, Naruto-sama?" "Yeah, come on in," Naruto called. As the 3 entered, they stopped and laughed, seeing Naruto and Hinata struggling to tie their belts in a neat fashion. No doubt the maids would raise a fuss about it before long. "You have been the royal family for just under a year now and you still can't tie a fucking sash." Taiya cackled, making Karen slap her across the head for insulting her cousin. "Taiya, you have been with us since we saved you from that pile of trees. When will you learn to watch your language?" Karen admonished her friend. Me. I am from fucking Iowa, remember? Our habits are harder to kill than seasoned Iowa Jonin." Taiya spat. "And Neji, you have been with us since the beginning. When are you going to stop being so damn formal?" Naruto added his own 2 cents. "As soon as you 2 finally make me an uncle, Naruto-sama, Hinata-sama." Neji smirked, seeing their faces turn red. Later that day, Naruto and Hinata entered the council chamber, seeing that everyone was already in attendance or at least walking towards their designated seats. Unlike the council in Konoha which had equal numbers civilian and military membership, his council had a civilian to military to ally ratio of 1:1, 2 representatives for each. Civilian affairs, ground forces, naval forces and allies of the empire. And each member has been hand-chosen from a list of nominations given by their respective faction. And each one with his or her own quirk. Iroh, the head of General Civilian Affairs, was a master firebender and was using his extensive firepower to gently cook some tea which he handed out to everyone in attendance, even those who were for all intents and purposes alcoholics couldn't say no to his tea. Izumi Kutris, the chairperson of the Merchants Association and the Alchemists Association, was someone Naruto both feared and respected. After all, it is not every day that a woman claiming to be a housewife can demolish an entire unit of soldiers as warm-up, keep everything running smoothly in 2 associations, and lastly train a group of alchemists like it was nothing. And she has a brutal fighting style, something Naruto found out when he once inadvertently pissed her off. Edward Whitebeard Newgate was an old man who tried to have Naruto join his family, but Naruto turned him down, saying that, quote, "I am not of Sea Dog's stock." Despite this, Naruto and Whitebeard have an uncle-nephew relationship instead of a father-son relationship. On the other hand, Shanks' red-haired Uzumaki was an actual family member of Naruto's. He was a captain in the Uzumaki merchant fleet before the Uzumaki clan was all but destroyed in the east, though he managed to save about 100 of the original 1,000. He eventually turned to piracy in order to provide for his clansmen until they found a home with one of the more peaceful warlords. When Shanks and Naruto first met each other, it was during Naruto's engagement party where Shanks heard another Uzumaki was in town, but ended up getting wasted when Naruto drank him under the table. Makarov Dreher was the oldest human present by several years. He is the current chairperson of the Association of Mage Guilds, a position he had received so many times in a row, now that he had jokingly and famously stated out loud, "I will never let go of this position, even if I am dead." Despite being one of the 2 people representing the army, he was actually someone who outright did his best to avoid conflict until someone messed with his brats. Even Whitebeard felt pity on the poor sod who last did that. He and Whitebeard have a comical rivalry going on, that being who is prouder of their kids' brats. Legenda was a prominent member in a rebellion against a tyrannical warlord who held one of the larger territories. She later became the leader of said territory until she resigned after finding the paperwork to be too tedious. It was also around this time that Naruto arrived and began negotiations for her territory to join the growing empire. On to the 2 members who represented the demi-human and non-human races, not actually part of the empire, but hold a strong friendship with those living in it. The first representative was Rimuru Tempest. At first, Naruto and Rimuru hated each other's guts, and the 2 of them would often get into verbal conflicts about various things, whilst Hinata was happily sipping tea and conversing with the members of Rimuru's own council. Even now, the 2 still argued about random things and would go all tsundier when asked if they were friends. The second representative is an elf prince named Legolas. His father is one of the 3 elf lords that rule over the elven people. He used to be the elven ambassador in the dwarven kingdoms, who still hold a stance of neutrality in everything, before being assigned the position he currently holds. "Now then," Naruto began. "Shall we begin the meeting?" The doors opened and the guards announced the entrance of the 2 shinobi from Konoha, oddly though, adding an X before the Konoha. Naruto clenched his fist before easing the muscles, glad that the sleeve of his kimono was covering his hands, whilst the silly mask he was wearing covered his face, despite itching like a colony of head lice. He couldn't curse the one who came up with this idea because it was his idea in the first place. He sent a small glare at Hinata, which she ignored when he sensed her using the principles of the Jukenjuho style to massage the itching areas on her face under the mask. Ex-Konoha soldiers, Tsunade Senju and Jiraiya the Snailinin. The announcer asked the white-haired person, who snapped a quick Sannin at him. Tsunade choked on her tongue and barely prevented herself from smashing the guard in the face. "That," the announcer said nonchalantly. Tsunade, having been taught royal decorum from a young age, was aghast at the informality of the guard. "Blondie, leave it. By royal decree, the citizens of the empire are to be less formal when in the presence of the royal family," Whitebeard told her. Tsunade got a small tick mark upon being called Blondie. "Miss Senju, please, speak," Naruto said, knowing that he had to act else she blew a gasket. Tsunade breathed in and out a few times to calm her nerves. "Your Imperial Majesty, the 2 of us have come from the east in search of my last living relative and Jiraiya's godson," she answered. "And what's the name of the person you seek?" Hinata asked. "His name is Uzumaki Naruto Uzumaki if we use the naming sense of the western lands," Tsunade answered. Naruto and Hinata looked at each other and a silent conversation went between them. "What will you do when you find him?" Hinata asked. "We will ask him to come back and help us save Konoha from the tyrant who holds my people in an iron grip," Tsunade answered, with Jiraiya nodding in agreement. "The same with the 2 people who left with him. What if they don't want to return to the east?" Hinata asked. "We'll find a way to convince him," Jiraiya answered. The council looked at them for a moment. It was Rimuru who broke the silence with a chuckle, which was infectious. Soon, the entire council body as well as the royal pair was laughing. Tsunade and Jiraiya looked around, wondering what was so funny. I'm sorry, but what you want to do is nigh impossible. Legolas answered their unasked question. And why is that? Jiraiya asked. Tsunade slapped him over the head with a hiss. Be more formal. Because I doubt the populace would appreciate it if I were to leave or involve them in yet another war. Naruto said, removing his mask. Hinata did the same. Naruto, you are the emperor. Tsunade was shocked beyond belief. Not my first choice is careers, but I didn't really have much of a choice. Naruto smiled. But my predecessor made it his last wish that I take over the reins of the empire when he passed away just under a year ago. Your predecessor? Tsunade asked. Yes. The first emperor and the one who held the vision of the unification of the western lands. Naruto began, nostalgia in his voice. Black Bear Kurokuma Aizen. The first emperor of the Yggdrasil Empire and a dear friend of mine. Naruto smiled, remembering the time when he first met Kurokuma. Flashback, 6 years ago. Naruto, Hinata, Neji, Karen and Taiya arrived in the port town, Kodsher, after a 3-week-long boat journey. Finally, we are off the fucking ship and back on bloody dry land. Taiya swore, wheeling her wheelchair down the pier towards the customs office at incredible speed. Taiya-san, language. Neji called. Bite me. She snapped back. She is right though. 3 weeks of nothing but waves and seasickness. I am glad to have good old earth under my feet again. Naruto said. Hinata giggled and Karen chuckled. Let's go and see if we can find a room or two. Karen said. Later, that evening, the group of 5 gathered around the table and were discussing their next step. The place seems quite run down. I'd like to remain here and help repair some of the buildings. Naruto stated. Whilst I am not overly fond of being around people, I agree with Shithead. Taiya agreed. I'd suggest moving more inland, away from here. This would be the first place for any hunters to look for us. Karen gave her vote. That would be my suggestion as well. Neji agreed. All eyes turned to Hinata, who blushed from the sudden attention, thought for a moment. I'll say that we stay here for a few days. We do not know this land nor its people. Thus it would be dangerous for us to travel anywhere else without knowing what the current situation is around us. She finally said. The others nodded, some in resignation, others not. She had a valid point. Without proper knowledge about the people they were amongst, they could not truly hope to fit in. This means that we will have to find a short-term job. Neji said. Taiya, you always wanted to play your flute in front of an audience. Karen said, with Taiya opening her mouth to swear, retort or something along those lines, then closed it, remembering having spoken to Karen about that sometime in the past. That is actually a good idea. Naruto said. The others nodded. When not using her flute to cast her genjutsu, Taiya was actually an accomplished musician. Then what will the rest of us do? Hinata asked. I could help out at the local clinic. Karen suggested. I'll go and look for work as a builder. Naruto said. I'll go with him. Neji said. Hinata, how about you work as a waitress for the landlord downstairs? Naruto suggested. Hinata thought about it, then nodded. As long as the clients don't get too handsy, I can do that. Oh, you poor girl. You have no idea how drunk clients act. Taiya and Karen thought. A few days later, it didn't take long for news to spread amongst the population of Kodsher of their arrival. Naruto and Neji quickly gained a reputation of being hard-working and trustworthy workers who did everything properly, despite a lack of experience, and were often sent all over the town to help the work crews that were desperately short on manpower. Taiya spent the sum total of 3 hours on the street corner before the local theater owner invited her to perform on stage. Taiya would later admit to having used a small genjutsu to help accelerate her climb of the social ladder. Karen was the least known person amongst the group since she worked as the doctor's assistant, though she admitted that she still had a lot to learn in terms of combating sicknesses and diseases, using the local medicines which were already in short supply due to the ongoing warfare. Then there was Hinata. Where to even begin? News of her working in the inn spread faster than wildfire, and the inn's popularity boomed overnight. Her calm and shy demeanor attracted the hearts and minds of most of her sober clients, and those few drunks who tried to either force themselves on her or just to molest her quickly found themselves on the end of a vicious beating of the still sober members of Hinata's new fan club. Once, when Naruto came home from work, they nearly beat him up as well when he gave Hinata a small peck on the cheek. The only reason they didn't was because Hinata spread chaos and carnage to those who landed a hit on Naruto. And the local lord, who witnessed the display, offered her a job as an attendant for his family, which she respectfully declined. Currently, Naruto and Neji were working on replacing the rope of the dock's crane when the alarm horn sounded. In the ensuing chaos, Naruto climbed to the highest point he could see, in this case the small lighthouse right next to the docks, and looked around to see what was going on. Neji, the town is under attack. He shouted down. Approximately west-southwest. Another army is also approaching from the north, different color. Neji nodded and left to warn the others. Naruto nodded and leapt from his vantage point to a balcony 20-odd feet below him, and from there to the ground another 30 feet below that. After that, he sprinted for Kodshire's walls to see if he could help. Once there, he barely managed to say that he was there to help before a spear and a crude helmet were pushed into his hands, and he was told to man the ramparts. "What is going on?" he asked around. No. The militiaman next to him groused out, "A sailor," Naruto reconned, by the hoarse sound of his voice. "Warlord Akamaru has violated the neutrality of our territory, and Warlord Kurokuma has come to support us." A guard captain shouted, addressing everyone on the walls. "Kurokuma's troops will keep Akamaru occupied long enough for the civilians to evacuate to the nearby fort where they will be safe." "What will be our duty, sir?" a man near Naruto asked. "We will hold these walls against any sneaky attack sent by Warlord Akamaru, at any costs," the commander shouted. Time skip. Over the next 2 days the battle between Kurokuma and Akamaru raged, and during each engagement, Kurokuma's lines were pushed back. "Hey Niji?" Naruto asked. "Yes," Niji answered. "What are the odds, in your opinion, that the inhabitants of this town will not survive this battle?" Naruto asked. "Almost guaranteed at this rate," Niji sighed. "You are not planning to do that, are you?" "I will if I have to," Naruto said. "You there, desertion is an offense, punishable by death." A nearby officer shouted, having overheard Niji and Naruto talking. "Prick." Naruto cursed when the man was out of hearing range. What would he know? Later that day, "Hold fast." The cry came just as Warlord Akamaru's soldiers brought up scaling ladders, having broken through Kurokuma's flank and opened a route to the town. The defenders were forced to take cover because of the arrows and stones being lobbed at them by the soldiers below, though Naruto and Niji just caught and threw the projectile back where they came from. When the first soldiers landed on the ramparts, it became clear that the ill-equipped town militia would not be able to match the battle-hardened soldiers opposing them. Except for 2 of them, that is. Niji engaged the first soldiers with some effort on his part due to their armor and shields. Naruto did what he did best, but Kurokuma, the hell is that? One of the generals under Kurokuma's command asked as a huge smoke cloud appeared on the walls of the town they were fighting for. Better yet, what is that? Kurokuma asked, seeing a mass of figures suddenly throw the soldiers at the foot of the walls back, effectively reforming his broken flank whilst at it, before simply continuing their assault on Akamaru's forces. "Back with Naruto and co." "Well, there he goes," Niji commented. "Hinata will not be happy about this. What is going on? How is this possible?" These questions and more were being asked by the surviving townsfolk as Naruto's army of clones fought a hard battle against the enemy soldiers. "Who the hell are you people?" one of the officers asked Niji. He recognized him as the one who threatened Naruto earlier that day. "Just some people trying to get away from constant war and wishing to live peaceful lives somewhere," Niji answered. "Then how do you explain that?" the man asked, pointing out the carnage below them. "That is Naruto saving your lives, so stop asking questions and shut up unless you have something sensible to say," Niji answered. The man and those around him immediately shut up, having seen him fight. They knew that he outclassed them more so than Akamaru's soldiers did. Down below, Naruto grunted as he dodged a club aimed for his head, only to have the man's shield slam into his face, sending him sprawling. A nearby clone of his grabbed the man's club before it could be brought down on Naruto's head. The quick jab to the throat made the man drop the club and grab his injured throat. The clone was not able to follow up on the jab as he was stabbed by a spear. The man wielding it got his hand slashed by Naruto, who then turned and kicked the downed man whose throat his clone hit in the head, rendering him unconscious. Hearing steps behind him, Naruto rolled out of the way, though he still received a small cut down his left arm. Another clone came in and stabbed a kunai under the swordsman's arm, where the armor was non-existent. Naruto was given a breather, which he used to look around. All around him, his clones and enemy soldiers were locked in a vicious melee, with his clone slowly gaining ground. The whistling sound snapped him out of it and he saw the incoming arrows too late. Fortunately, he was only hit in the thigh muscle and his forearm. Making note of the arrowheads around him, Naruto realized that none of the arrows were barbed, so he grabbed the arrows in him and pulled them out, holding back curses as he did so. Ignoring the pain in his arm and leg, Naruto crossed his fingers again to reinforce his one-man army, and the battle raged on until the sun began to sink below the horizon. Naruto was later found by Niji, badly injured but alive and asking for a bowl of ramen. "Yup, he'll be alright." The next day, morning broke upon the land around Kotsure, and as the high of battle finally wore off, soldiers and civilians alike swallowed the bile, threatening to erupt from their stomachs upon seeing the scores upon scores of corpses littering the battlefield. Almost immediately the cleanup began as every able-bodied man was drafted into either digging mass graves or hauling the dead onto carriages to be brought to said mass graves. Kurokuma meanwhile was in a discussion with a local mayor about the sudden appearance of the reinforcements, but he had no answers. Meanwhile, in a makeshift hospital in Kocher, Naruto was being bandaged up, having suffered numerous wounds during his brash assault on the enemy soldiers, with Neji having convinced Hinata to wait until the nurse was done bandaging Naruto before beginning her lecture. Then she will rant for 10 bloody minutes. Taya said. 20 that the rant will go on for longer than 30. Neji countered, shaking her hand on that. Hinata wasn't done until she literally dropped asleep on top of Naruto 4 hours later, and Taya invented new swear words as she handed Neji a handful of cash. Time skip, next morning, Kurokuma walked into the room, seeing the two dark-haired members first cause their hair ends to stand out in a white room after all, then the red-haired female in the wheelchair next to them. He then saw the blonde-haired male on the bed next to the dark-haired female. Instantly, his instincts told him that this is who he was looking for. Before we begin, allow me to firstly thank you for saving this town. He greeted them with a bow. My name is Aizen Kurokuma Blackbear, warlord of these lands. Flashback end. Naruto smiled at the memory of his first meeting with Kurokuma. Yggdrasil? What is that? Jiraiya asked. In all of his life, he had never heard of such a word before. Tsunade was just as baffled. It is the name of a large tree from Kurokuma's ancestral home. Naruto answered. I also asked him about it when he told me about his ambitions after training and rising through the ranks, that is. Flashback, 5 years ago. So, Blackbear, Naruto began, referring to Kurokuma by his real name, not the title nickname. I know that you have a dream to unite the western lands, but what will you even call it? Much has changed in the year following the Battle of Kocher. Naruto and his group were accepted into Kurokuma's army, with Taya receiving the best medical attention that was available, and after a series of operations, she regained most of the functions in her legs, though it wouldn't be until 2 years later that she fully recovered. Naruto and Neji were taken under the wing of Kurokuma's generals, who trained them, taught them the art of war, as well as leadership skills that worked for both the military as well as civilian affairs. Naruto excelled at these, surprisingly, whilst Neji surpassed him in pure combat potential. Naruto made up for this by trouncing him in each and every game of chess and Nefertiti, a game originating in Kurokuma's ancestral home. 1. Hinata was taken under the arm of Kurokuma's sister, who refined Hinata's court etiquette and such skills, though she had to refuse proposals on an almost daily basis from those noble families serving under Kurokuma's banner. Eventually even Naruto had enough and publicly proposed to her, which she happily accepted. Less than 10 minutes later, Neji took him aside and, because Hiashi requested he do this to anyone Hinata accepts, gave him the usual list of threats should Naruto break Hinata's heart, much to the mirth of Karen and Taya, whilst Hinata just awkwardly chuckled when Neji gave an additional list of threats, not as a proxy, but as a cousin. Karen meanwhile continued to hone her medical skills and was taught a defensive martial art style, effectively becoming a combat medic doctor. Due to the ongoing wars, she quickly gained vast amounts of experience with wounds, broken bones and PTSD counseling, the last one being especially hard for her since she herself had a very light case of PTSD since she watched her mother's murder, for lack of a better term, due to Kusa, putting too much strain on her family's healing bloodline. I shall call it the Yggdrasil Empire. Kurokuma answered, taking a swig from his mead. Yggdrasil? What is that? Naruto and Hinata asked. It is a tale passed down by my family since before our people were forced out of our ancestral home, far to the north, a land where water turns to stone all year round. Kurokuma answered, looking somber. There, legends told of a tree so big that from roots to crown, it connected 9 worlds to each other, including this one, called the Yggdrasil, the World Tree. He turned to look at Naruto, Hinata, Taya, Neji and the others in the room, some of whom were former enemies, others recent allies, but all at a point where they can call each other friend. My dream is for the Yggdrasil Empire to serve a similar purpose, to connect all the people in the western lands, no matter who they are or what race and or culture, they will find a home within the empire. Kurokuma said proudly. So you wish to instill a sense of unity within the name itself, hoping that it will inspire the people to fight for a united cause instead of following individual warlords? Neji asked. Indeed, my friend. Kurokuma answered with a smile. Naruto chuckled before lifting his cup and toasted the name, which everyone in the room answered with cheers. The evening, Imperial Palace. Jiraiya and Tsunade were tired of a day filled with surprises, destroyed plans and more surprises. The latest of these was when they joined Naruto, Hinata and the 4 others in their small family, Neji, Taya, Karen and Haruka, a redeemed female who bore a striking resemblance to Naruto, so close that they could nearly be identical twins, minus the whisker marks, red hair, and the fact they were different genders. The last one was a real shocker to the 2 Sannin, who had not expected that. The only thing that delayed their questions at this point was when Hinata came in with their supper that she had conjured up, the heavenly smell alone making their stomachs rumble. As soon as the food had been eaten, the questions began, starting with why former members of Atagakure were with Naruto, Jiraiya, and how Naruka came to be, Tsunade. Naruto sighed at the torrent of questions before smiling, remembering how he met the non-Konoha members of his small family. Flashback 1, Taiya, 2 weeks after Naruto's banishment. Naruto was still reeling from the news that Hinata had given him a week ago. When they had reunited, Hinata had come clean with everything, her feelings, her first meeting with Naruto that he had forgotten due to a beating that he had received later that day by the drunk family members of the bullies that Naruto had scared away. Hinata only knew about this because she and Hiashi had gone to look for Naruto to thank him for protecting her from bullies and came across the beating in progress. She continued with the time she followed him, looking at him from the shadows, finding encouragement in her own goals from his determination and steadfast will to never give up, and lastly the feelings she felt when he cheered her on during her match with Neji during the Chunin exams. Granted, it took her a few days due to her fainting habit, but she got it all out. Naruto, overwhelmed by all that was said to him, didn't know how to answer. Neji chose to join Naruto because, quote, "You have changed my life around for the better, given me a new lease on life. That is not something I can just let go without repaying you. My conscience won't allow it." He had since then become the self-proclaimed guardian of Naruto and Hinata in name only. Naruto and Hinata considered him a true companion. Hanabi wanted to go with her sister, especially since the two of them had reconciled ever since the Chunin exams, specifically, after Neji's match with Naruto. Hiashi came clean to her after his visit to Neji, which caused her to run up to Hinata, give her the biggest hug she could give with her small arms, and cried out years of frustration and self-pity that she had bottled up inside her, because it was the Hyuga way, at the first opportunity given following the invasion and subsequent funeral of the third Hokage. But Hiashi forbade her, stating that he had made his peace that he would lose one of his children. He refused to lose another. In the end, with promises from Hinata that she would write to her whenever possible, Hanabi relented. Now, they were traveling towards Nami no Kuni, where Naruto wanted to visit some old friends of his, a certain bridge builder and his family. Man, Tamari certainly did a number on this forest. Naruto commented as they made their way through the destroyed forest. She'd make a fortune being a lumberjack. I wouldn't know. I was fighting somewhere else. Neji stated before stopping and looking around. Byakugan activated. How is she still alive? He asked, anger seeping into his voice. What? Who? Hinata and Naruto asked. The girl who was with the team who took Sasuke. Neji answered. She is alive and trapped underneath some trees. Hey, where are you going? He called out as Naruto headed off in the direction he was pointing in. To save her. Naruto called back. Hinata was close on his heels and Neji grudgingly followed. They found the girl, who seemed to be sleeping, and even Naruto could tell that something was really off with this picture. The girl was sleeping, whilst both her legs were completely crushed under a pile of logs. Page Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto called, summoning forth a score of clones who began to systematically dismantle the log pile, without moving any of the lower logs, as though it were a game of pick-up sticks, an extreme version of pick-up sticks. As soon as the last log was lifted of the girl, they all winced looking at the state of the legs. The bones were definitely shattered, and it looked as though she had tried to escape before, only for the situation to become worse. As they saw the blood flow freely through the limbs again, they heard the girl moan in pain, before hearing her murmur, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," over and over again until they brought her a nearby stream where they decided to make camp until the girl woke up. Whilst Neji and a pair of Naruto's clones pitched the tents, the real Naruto was off gathering firewood and some edible plants, whilst Hinata was preparing a salve that she hoped was strong enough to numb the pain the girl would undoubtedly feel when she woke up. It wasn't until the next day that the girl woke up. And much to Neji's dismay began cursing the high heavens from the pain, though that was strongly dulled after Hinata applied her salve to her legs. Thanks, she groaned as the smell of cooking fish and stick bread reached her nose. Fuck, I am hungry. Not surprising, considering you were underneath those logs for around 2 weeks. Naruto said, handing her grilled fish and a stick bread. How did you survive this long anyway? She cocked an eyebrow. The hell you say? Her eyes widened when she recognized him. You? Yeah, me. Naruto said. And no, we are no longer enemies. Give me one fucking reason to believe a single bloody word you number CHOMP number. She was silenced when he shoved the freshly baked stick bread into her mouth and she automatically started chewing on it. For one, you are not in Konoha right now. She turned to see the guy who had engaged the leader of her old team. We are no longer with Konoha anyway, we are probably not allowed to go there anymore anyway. Please calm down. We just got you out from that pile of trees yesterday. Hinata told her, her voice seemingly calming her down. Fine, the girl growled before devouring the rest of the bread and the fish, holding out her hand for more. And I survived because I had my doki bring me whatever water and food they could find. Name's Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto greeted her as he handed her a pair of fish and stick bread. Her eyes widened a bit, but she first chowed the food he had given her. Aren't Uzumaki supposed to have bloody red hair? She asked. Got my hair from my dad. Naruto said. Hinata and Neji raised an eyebrow. Naruto had not told them anything about his parentage, despite admitting he knew who they were a few days ago. The girl just shrugged. Name's Taiya. More grub. Now. Naruto rolled his eyes but gave her more of the fish. My name is Hinata. Taiya turned to look at the girl who was currently busy bandaging her legs. This is my cousin, Neej. She saw the older male give her a nod in greeting. Where will you be taking me? She asked. First we will be heading to Nami no Kuni. Naruto said. There we can see if there is anything that can be done for your legs. And your tongue, Neej murmured, but everyone still heard him. Bite me, okay. I grew up in Iowa. Our habits are harder to fucking kill than seasoned Iowa jonin. She snapped back. Are all citizens of Iowa that foul-mouthed? Naruto asked. No shit, shithead. Taiya snapped at him, grabbing the fish he was about to eat from his hand and devouring that as well, before patting her stomach, satiated. You can thank that fucking hellhole called a Togakur for that. But the Orochimaru leading them, I don't doubt it. Naruto commented, a bit miffed that his fish got stolen. Taiya just nodded before taking a good look at the three former Konoha shinobi. Overall, she didn't get the vibe that they would betray her to bounty hunters from them, however due to old allegiances, she was being careful not to reveal too much information. The blonde boy, Naruto, was just as short as she remembered him to be and apparently just as brash as when she met him. The hair color however was slowly hurting her eyes whenever the sun shone on it, so she turned her attention to the next person, Neej. From him, she got some awkward vibes. He seemed stoic, but having lived in a Togakur where most of the residents hide their faces most of the time, she simply read his body language. She could tell that he was strangely calm and composed, unlike his other male companion, who just left to catch more fish. Lastly, she turned her attention to the girl and immediately her eyes began twitching. What the fuck did you eat to get such a bod? She asked, making Neej spit out the tea he was just drinking, Naruto to stumble into the stream, and Hinata to squeak and blush, twiddling her fingers. Hinata couldn't answer immediately. Just ordinary food. Bullshit. Taiya said, eyebrow twitching. How much milk did you drink? Hinata refused to answer. She was embarrassed enough as it was. A few days later, they camped out near the stream until Taiya became well enough to travel for long distances, and when the time came to decide on who would carry her, Neej made the fatal decision to challenge Naruto to a bet. The stakes. The loser had to carry Taiya until they reached Nami. The bet was simple, who could find more of the herbs Hinata needs for her ointment salve, with Hinata being the judge. They should have chosen something else. Naruto has shadow clones, enough said. As it was, they were just leaving the forest, Hinata and Naruto walking ahead and chatting with each other, while Neej, with Taiya on his back, walked a bit behind them, both feeling like third wheels in this crew. Hey, can you slow down a bit? Taiya said. The atmosphere over there is way too bright. She pointed to the younger teens ahead of them. Neej just nodded and slowed down his pace for a bit. Later, why? Taiya asked them as they made camp that day. Everyone looked at her. Why go out of your way to save me? She clarified. Why help me when I was your enemy less than a month ago? Because for one, we are no longer enemies, and second, I don't think you are that bad of a person. Naruto said as he was busy striking his flint and steel, trying to get the kindling to light. Taiya looked at him as though he were crazy. Look, I took a gamble when I chose to rescue you back there. And thus far you have not shown any reason for us to regret it. Naruto told her in one of his rare moments of wisdom, with Hinata and Neej both nodding in agreement. When it came to an unbiased judging of people, Naruto was better than them at it than them. Taiya looked at them, then turned away, refusing to let them see the tears forming in her eyes. The others didn't say anything. They already knew. A week later, Nami no Kuni. Okay, I know I helped protect this bridge, but I don't remember it being this huge. Naruto said as they crossed the bridge. A light fog had descended and although they could see a fair distance, they couldn't see the end of the bridge. Neej felt his eyebrow twitch, Hinata was giggling at Naruto's antics, and Taiya was caught halfway between gawking at the size of the bridge and laughing at Neji's reaction. Things have changed in this last week, more so than she would admit. She had begun opening up to the group, finding Neji's steadfastness and Hinata's gentleness a good anchor point for Naruto's excessive charisma, unpredictable hyperactiveness and blunt never-give-up mentality, which was slowly breaking down her walls. She shook her head, wondering if she should actually try and open up to them. Skip. Their warm welcome into Nami was a surprise to everyone in the group, and the local doctors and healers, at Naruto's request, took a look at Taiya's legs. All of them stated that there was very little if nothing they could do for her. Over the next few weeks, during which Naruto and Neej helped with the ongoing rebuilding of the islands, Taiya came to a decision. Later that day she opened up to Naruto, Hinata and Neej. She had intended to only talk about her past before Orochimaru saved her, but once she broke the dam, the water just kept flowing. She laid everything out to them, with Hinata often letting her cry into her shoulder. As the tears eventually turned to drowsiness, Taya just asked them not to leave her, as had done so many in her life before drifting off to sleep, still clinging to Hinata's jacket. Flashback 1 end. Jiraiya looked deadpan at Taya, who smirked at him. Not once had he expected this from the former Iwa citizen turned Odo Kunoichi. We didn't need to talk about it. It was a unanimous decision by the three of us. Naruto said. Okay, remind me again not to ever go and make a bet against you. His godfather said. What about Uzumaki Karen? How did you find your cousin? Naruto smirked before telling him how that happened. Flashback 2, Karen, 2 months after Naruto's banishment. Naruto and the others arrived at a small village near Tanigakure in Kawa, no Kuni. It was here that Taya looked around and recognized some of the landmarks. Hey, shitheads and Squeaky. She called out to Naruto, Neji and Hinata, who all grumbled at the nicknames. I think we are near one of Orochimaru's old hideouts. Say what? Naruto asked. Not an important one, mind you, Taya continued, ignoring Naruto. A minor one that was more designed to be a bloody fob for raids and such shit. We may get some extra gear for Blondie and shithead here. Are you sure, Taya? Hinata asked. Taya nodded. I was first stationed here after passing PFT. PFT? Naruto asked. Hedamaru's fucking training. Taya said bluntly. Even then he had a fucking rep. I don't want to know, Neji answered. What I am saying is that not everyone is with Orochimaru by their free will. Taya said. Also, I may be able to find someone there who can give us intel on what the hell is going on in the main villages. The three former Konoha shinobi looked at each other and nodded. They did need some information on current affairs after all. Alright. What can you tell us about the base? Neji asked. Later. We are being followed. Hinata said quietly. Naruto, what do Naruto? The others looked around only to see Naruto missing. Will Blondie be alright? Taya asked. He is capable of outrunning our Anbu. He'll be fine. Neji answered, deadpan expression on his face. Meanwhile, with Naruto. Okay, where the hell am I? Naruto asked himself. Yes, he was lost. Whilst the others were walking towards the local tavern, he somehow ended up in the local red light district. Hey there, kid. Are you lost? He turned to see a woman carrying a bag of groceries. Gee, what gave it away, lady? Naruto deadpanned. He got a suspicious vibe from her, something he hadn't felt in a while. He barely managed to keep his eyebrows from rising when he realized that this woman had a train chakra network inside her and was currently walking under a henge. The lady giggled before pointing at his traveling gear. Most people who come to this humble town with traveling gear usually head straight to the tavern at the center of town next to the main hall. Naruto cocked his head to the side. And where is that exactly? She pointed to the left. Walk down that road, take a right when you reach the water fountain, 2 blocks later, take a left. The tavern will be the third building on the left. Many thanks, lady. Naruto said as he ran down the road. Quickly stopping next to an alleyway and adjusting his backpack, he continued on. Nobody realized that in that moment, he had created a dozen shadow clones inside that alleyway. A few minutes later, Taya was laughing her ass off seeing Hinata venting her worry at Naruto's disappearance and subsequent reappearance just under a second ago. Even Neji, though outwardly not showing it, was chuckling on the inside, seeing the sight. Naruto meanwhile was completely lost. He had absolutely zero experience with situations like these, and it irked him somewhat. Hey, can we get a room and plan our next step of our journey? Naruto asked. And Hinata, you're keen to drawing a crowd here, sure. So 3 rooms, right? Taya asked, smirking. 1 for me, 1 for shithead, and 1 for the 2 of you, since it sounds like you 2 need 1. Naruto, thanks to his month of training under Jiraiya, immediately knew what she was implying. Hinata meanwhile took a moment to comprehend what Taya was saying, then joined Naruto in inventing new shades of red faces. Meanwhile, across the road, there is no way in hell that those guys are shinobi. One of the people following the group said into a microphone. 2 of them are reinventing the concept of blushing for log's sake. Don't let your guard down. He heard the response in his earpiece. Agent 3 apparently met one of them and sensed chakra from the blonde one. Also, the 2 with dark hair fit the description of the Hyuga clan in Konoha, only missing their trademark eyes. They could be using contact lenses to change that though. Copy that. Will continue my observation duty. The first one drawled out before returning to observing the group, which had devolved into a shouting match between a still blushing brunette and the redhead, whilst the blonde had calmed down and was sipping some tea and eating what appeared to be popcorn alongside the tall brunette male. Want some popcorn? Yeah, sure. The spy answered, grabbing the bag that was handed to him. He ate a few, then stopped. His head snapped to the side just in time for him to eat a meal of knuckle sandwiches. 1 minute later, Naruto's clone looked down at his handiwork, wiping the dust of his shoulder. Not even worth the effort. At his feet, bound up in a way that makes it impossible for even Green Jonin to escape was an Odo shinobi. In the clone's hand was a smashed radio set and a cyanide pill tooth that he had knocked out during the knuckle sandwich feast he had served. "Now then, better let the boss know," the clone said, chucking a pebble at the window. Everyone in the room looked at him, with him waving and giving a thumbs up, then dispelling. What followed was pandemonium as masked shinobi assaulted random people in the town, all bearing the symbol of a Togakur on their forehead protectors. This of course alerted the nearby garrison of Tanigakure shinobi who came to investigate. And in the ensuing confusion, Naruto's clones grabbed the remaining real Togakur shinobi, bound them up, then brought them to the rendezvous point outside of town, specifically, on the opposite side of where Taiya said the outpost was. There, Taiya played music for the fools on a new flute that Neji had bought her back in Nami, placing the Odo shinobi in a torture genjutsu until they broke and spilled everything. The names of those still in the base, how many team are spread out in the immediate area, what defenses were in place, layout of the base, the whole lot. At the mention of one of the names, Taiya flinched. "Let's go," Naruto said and then began marching off until Hinata ran over and steered him in the correct direction. "Oops," he said, rubbing his head, embarrassed. Hinata just giggled and kissed his cheek before realizing what she just did and fainting. "Pay up, I win," Taiya said, holding out a hand. Neji grumbled as he handed her a 50 note. Next morning, one couldn't really call the attack on the outpost an assault. Thanks to the intel taken from the captured Odo shinobi, who were currently being handed over to the team from Tani by some disguised clones, Naruto, Hinata and Neji snuck in without raising the alarm, with Naruto dismantling the traps without effort, whilst muttering low-level crap and third-rate trappers under his breath. The 2 times they were discovered, Neji took them out before they could sound the alarm, with Hinata helping Naruto in tying them up. In total, there were only 2 teams of Odo shinobi in the outpost, including the one shinobi who Taiya asked for them to spare, a girl with red eyes and red hair a few shades lighter than Taiya's. "Who are you?" she hissed, holding a kunai out defensively. "Karen?" Hinata asked her, making her eyes widen and nod. "Taiya asked us to not hurt you." Karen gasped, lowering the kunai. "Taiya-chan is alive. Alive and waiting for us at our rendezvous point in town," he said. She looked at him and tried to smell his chakra. And immediately fell onto her ass. His reserves were ridiculous, almost as large as Lord Orochimaru's. "How can I be sure that you know her?" she asked. "Or that I can trust you, any of you? For one, she swears a lot." Neji, Hinata and Naruto deadpanned in unison. "Also, she told us about your surname Uzumaki Karen," Naruto said in a low voice. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto, son of the late clan heiress, Uzumaki Kushina, and the 4th Hokage, Namikaze Minato." Karen's eyes widened as far as they could go. She wanted to call him out on his BS, but his face held no hints of lies, nor did his chakra fluctuate, an indication of a lie, or at least half-lie. "Let's go. By dawn, a team from Tani will be on the way." Naruto offered her his hand. "Unless you want to stay here," she immediately grabbed his hand. "I will come with you, if only to talk with Taiya-chan again," she said. Naruto nodded. "Let me first introduce you to the others." He indicated Neji. "This is Neji Hyuga. Don't let his stoic glare affect you. He's a big softy on the inside," he said. Karen suppressed a laugh at the glare that Neji sent him, one which he ignored. "And this is his cousin, Hinata Hyuga. She is quite the cuddle bug. Only as much as you are a teddy bear, Naruto-kun," Hinata said with a small blush, telling Karen all she needed to know about those two's relationship. "Something brewing, but not quite there yet. Nothing a little prank or two couldn't fix." "Before we leave, where is the armory?" Neji asked. "It's this way, though we don't really use it as one since Lord Orochimaru has turned most of it into a library of stolen scrolls, which he was unable to open or read." "I see, let's see what he has there anyway." Naruto shrugged before following her further into the outpost. Later, upon returning to the tavern where they were currently staying, Naruto was surprised to see 2 Tani shinobi in the room, talking to Taiya. "I already fucking told you, I have no idea which way the fucking shinobi went," she told the Tani Jonin. All 3 of them turned to see Naruto and company enter the room. "Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt," Naruto said, closing the door and smirking. Taiya growled at his implication and shouted, "Just come in her, fuckface." The other Tani shinobi gulped. He was a censor, and he felt a massive amount of chakra coming from the blonde. "Just kidding. Anyway, we encountered a friend of yours on the way back from the river." Naruto was thrown into the wall as Karen pushed him out of the way and leapt at Taiya. "Taiya-chan number SMASH number CRASH number CRUNCH number I missed you so much." "Hey Karen, lem go already," Taiya said, trying to pry the other redeed off of her. "I believe you have some explaining to do." The Jonin who had just spoken to Taiya turned to Naruto and Co. "Such is why a group of trained shinobi is in our territory without a shinobi's traveling permit. That is because as far as we are concerned, we are no longer shinobi," Neji answered. We have been asked not to divulge any of the information, but one of us has been charged with a crime he didn't commit and was given the choice between 2 years in Hazuki Castle or exile. They watched the Jonin and his companion wince at the mention of Hazuki Castle. What was the crime? He asked. Injuring a fellow shinobi during a mission to retrieve said shinobi who had gone rogue. Naruto answered dully. That was the council's favorite and I managed to return him with relatively minor injuries. The bane of any shinobi village. The Jonin commented, making a note on his page. What are your names? My name is Menma, no family name that I know of. Naruto answered. My name is Ryu. This is my cousin, Hana. Niji introduced himself and Hinata. We encountered Menma after our village was overrun by bandits and we joined him on his travels. And this troublemaker is Karen. My ex-lover. Taiya growled out, still trying to pry Karen off of her. Naruto, Niji and Hinata and the two shinobi froze, then mechanically turned their heads towards Taiya and a heavily blushing Karen. Why did you tell them about that? She hissed, whilst a drop of blood leaked from her nose. Because it is the truth that we used to be extremely handsy with each other with plenty of clothes on action, and my tits are hurting because you are crushing them right now. Flashback to end. Jiraiya's face turned blank before his nose started bleeding, which earned him a dual haymaker from both Taiya and Karen, with an additional beatdown on the way from Tsunade, all of whom called him a pervert. Naruto chuckled before holding out a hand and Hinata and Niji both handing over a 100 note each. Naruka just looked on with a small smile on her face before turning to Tsunade and asking, can you teach me to punch like that? Sure. Why not? Tsunade asked. Now, what exactly is your relation to Naruto? Flashback 3, Naruka, 2 years after arriving in the West. 1. It's been 2 years since Naruto and Ko arrived in the West. In that time, they lived their lives. Karen continued to hone her skills in the medical field, getting her doctor's certificate, 4th order, a year and a half after entering the system, and continues to study under a 1st order doctor. Taiya continued in the musical industry with her flute, though she also received regular treatment for her legs, and a year and took her first steps with the help of crutches. Interestingly enough, Niji intervened on more than one occasion when someone tried to charm Taiya, with Naruto and Hinata opening up a betting pool on the two of them. Hinata began a tutorship under Kurokuma's sister, who basically ran the economy in his realm. Kurokuma may be a good military commander, but he was average when running an economy. And just because she was an economist didn't mean that she was defenseless, which Hinata soon found out during their frequent spars and Naruto whenever he called her Granny number 2. Naruto and Niji were taken under the wings of 2 of Kurokuma's generals, learning the art of war, learning to handle weapons, how to lead troops in battle, and more importantly, learning to earn the respect and loyalty of their people and those who follow them. And whilst Niji proved to be the greater commander, Naruto was the better leader and commanded more respect from his troops than Niji did. Hinata and Naruto advanced their relationship and became engaged shortly before Kurokuma officially launched the Unification War, about a year after they arrived in the West. The reason was that as Hinata and Naruto weren't officially engaged yet, nobles could still force her to be either their mistress or their concubine. Each time, either Kurokuma warned them off or Naruto made a few dozen clones during his duel with said noble and proceeded to beat the shit out of him, or, in one case, her. Hey, there was never a rule stipulated that one couldn't make clones of oneself to help during a duel. This time though, it wasn't a noble underneath Kurokuma's rule who demanded her hand in marriage, but a neighboring warlord to the north whom Kurokuma had sent an envoy for a 1-year-long alliance so he could focus on the warlord on his southern border. When Naruto heard the news, he was furious enough to vow vengeance, but compassed enough that he straight up proposed to Hinata, who tearfully accepted. It was the happiest day of her life, with the sole downside being that she saw Taiya, Karen, Niji, Kurokuma and numerous other people exchange bundles of money, making about half of them smile, whilst the other half grumbled at lost the damn bet again. The warlord declared war, but was given a bloody nose when Naruto and Niji, both of whom were corpse 2 commanders at this point, caught his army in an ambush in a mountain pass and smashed them. They then pursued the warlord to his mountain fortress. Under normal circumstances, that place was supposed to withstand a siege for a year. Naruto and Niji were far from normal circumstances. The very first day, Naruto and his clones stormed the walls, opened the gates, and let the combined force of his and Niji's corpse take the outer walls. By the end of the week, the fortress had been captured, the warlord having been slain by his own retainer, who assumed command for all about 1 day before he was captured. It was upon their triumphant return to Kurokuma's capital that Naruto and Niji learned from the spies they sent into the elemental nations that a lab of Orochimaru's had been found. The spies didn't report any further, but Kurokuma authorized for Naruto and Karen to go and investigate. At first, they were to visit the hospital where Taiya was getting treatment. There, they witnessed Taiya take the first tentative steps, unassisted by crutches, the first she had made in over 2 years. Karen, who worked at the hospital, cried as her best friend took a major leap towards recovery. Hinata leaned against Naruto, the two of them smiling in congratulations. Neji actually clapped his hand and cheered Taiya on, before coughing into his hand with a blush on his face. Naruto and Hinata saw this and smiled. The betting pool just got raised by 50 ryo. So, what is this I hear about Blondie and Karen-chan heading back to the inn? Taiya asked that evening, as the group and some friends of theirs sat around the fire, cooking dinner. Our spies there have discovered one of Orochimaru's labs, hidden on one of the isles of the Land of Water. Apparently the place is overrun with monsters, but one of the infiltration specialists reported sightings of what appeared to be Western medical technology. Naruto told her. But why send Karen? Taiya asked. I also know. We need speed and stealth for this mission. Karen told her. No offense, but stealth was never on your priority list, and we can't move very fast with you mostly still confined to a wheelchair or crutches. One of their closest friends from the west, a shield maiden who came from the same tribe as Kurokuma, who was saved by Naruto and Neji during one of the border wars with neighboring warlords a year back. I am a bit lost. Who is Orochimaru? Skull, Orochimaru is the worst criminal imaginable in the elemental nations. Naruto said bluntly. He experimented on humans, which is what led to him becoming a criminal in the first place, but he managed to escape capture, and since then, he has been kidnapping, stealing and experimenting incessantly in his hidden laboratories. Remember the piece of shit Oni I used to be able to turn into, until that funky hickey mark on my neck was removed last month? Taiya asked. Skull and the other nodded and shuddered. That was a gruesome affair. Whilst Naruto was busy removing it, Taiya had gone on a rampage, and it took an entire battalion of Naruto and Niji's best to restrain her. That was one of his more successful experiments. Karen and I used to be his subordinates, but for various reasons, we left him and joined Blondie, Squeaky and Shithead. If that was him being successful, then I shudder to think what his failures look like. Another friend, an old knight called Samuel sighed. He was Naruto's chief lieutenant in his corps, but Naruto's habit of not treating his men as subordinates and more like fellow people bought him his friendship. Trust me, you don't want to fucking know. Taiya shuddered. Language? Neji said. Fucking bite me. Taiya snapped at him. So, when is the ship leaving? The ship is being loaded as we speak. Tomorrow at first light the captain wants to sail from the harbor at first light. We could be gone for a month, depending on the weather. Naruto said. What about us? Hinata asked. Well, someone's got to take care of you, you know, make sure that another stupid fat warlord or noble doesn't try his luck with you. Naruto said, pocking her on the forehead, making her pout. Besides, Skull needs a new hobby. Naruto said, getting a loud hey. From the shield maiden. Maybe you can teach her some knitting. Skull paled when it appeared that Hinata was actually considering it. A week later, Naruto had to admit, the journey back to the end was far more pleasant than the journey to the western lands, because the ship he was on A didn't stop at each and every port on the way, and B was a lot faster than the slow-ass trading ship he was on. Still didn't help because both he and Karen still got seasick. When they finally arrived at their destination, the local Kiri shinobi could only shake their heads when Naruto and Karen immediately headed off and threw up in the nearest bin they could find. They wrote the pair off as not being a threat because this was just one of the outlying islands after all, and the sight of passengers rushing off the ship and throw up in one of the bins was a fairly common occurrence. Later the two met up with the spies near the laboratory, and the two immediately saw why they couldn't get any intel on the interior. The place was swarming with feral demons, or more accurately, those people marked with Orochimaru's cursed seal that had gone berserk. Is there any way to save them? Naruto asked Karen, who shook her head, having sensed the chakras of the transformed humans and found them completely corrupted. I see, he said morosely. After dealing with the berserk curse-sealed people, Naruto, Karen and the spies entered the lab and found the place completely trashed. As Karen was making a comment about how she agreed with the spy who infiltrated the place, she suddenly felt a tingle on her senses. There was a chakra signature somewhere in the base that wasn't corrupted like the others, but it didn't feel as pure as normal chakra, it felt like two chakra signatures that had been successfully spliced together. Not only that, but the signatures felt very damn familiar to her. As they continued to search, they came across corpses, most torn to shreds, literally, others crushed. Eventually they came across a room where they saw growth tanks, all of them broken except for one, which still had equipment connected, the light on the inside of the tank giving off an eerie green light. What is this? Naruto asked nobody in particular. Karen kneeled down and picked up a notepad, dusting it off before reading it. Not what who? She said, eyes furrowing as she continued to read. Project Nuke, dubbed Naruka or just simply Naruka. Oh, Kabuto, you fucking sick son of a bitch. What's the matter? Naruto asked. He had rarely ever heard her swear like that before. She is his project to create a perfect specimen and Uzumaki with all of their best known traits. Longevity, the same healing abilities I have, your self-healing ability, the chakra chains of your mother, you name it. She growled. Was he successful? Naruto asked, trying to keep his anger in check. From the numerous times she had been released from the tank to learn the language, learn how to fight, all that stuff, she has thus far shown all of the above. Karen said. Except for the chakra chains. But she also refuses to listen to anyone. Karen stopped as she saw the girl's genetic origin. Oh, now I really want to kill that dot. You're sounding a lot like Taiya. Naruto said, trying to ease his anger with a joke. Fucking bite me then. Karen snapped at him. After a while, both of them started laughing. In all seriousness, what is the matter this time? Naruto asked. She handed him the page she just read. Uzumaki specimen number 072, codename. Naruka 0-1-4. Owners, Uzumaki Naruto x Konoha Shinobi, status. Unknown, assumed dead. Uzumaki Karen x Odo Shinobi, status. Traitor, unknown, assumed in hiding. Notes. Scheduled for termination as she does not comply with orders from their superiors. Any forms of restraint were broken by her until tranquilizers are used. However, great steps have been made which we can apply to specimen number 073, Naruka 0-1-5 once she has grown enough for stage 2. Naruto looked at Karen and nodded. Leave some of him for me to kill. Releasing her. Karen said and reached for the release button. As she did, Naruka's eyes snapped open and she looked at Naruto with a glare, which morphed into confusion when she didn't recognize him. Flashback 3 end. Afterwards, she went on a bit of a rampage until we managed to restrain her and calm her enough that we could begin communicating. Naruto said. Karen and some of the doctors have determined that Kabuto never gave her lessons on how to control her emotions, and even now, she is more like an Inuzuka than anything, acting on their emotions rather than their thoughts. Sounds a lot like you, Haim. Jiraiya commented and was immediately sent into the floor by Tsunade. That will be 10,000 bucks for the floor repairs, please. Hinata said, a counting board in her hands. Those wooden boards have been specially imported from the land of spring and cost a small fortune. Tsunade looked at her aghast. 10,000 Ryo for a few square meters of floorboarding. What, want me to remove the 50% discount I gave you? Hinata asked, raising an eyebrow. Off to the side, Naruto, Karen and Naruka were all holding their hands to their mouth because they were that close to laughing. Hinata had adopted a rather nasty trolling streak from her teacher, Kurakuma's late wife, one that worked wonders in the business sector, but hilarious in situations like these. 2 weeks after Jiraiya and Tsunade arrived in the west. So, brat? Tsunade asked, what are you planning? The Unification War ended nearly a year ago. Naruto said from his position behind his desk with the usual bunch of clones on either side working on paperwork. I was planning on holding a couple of tournaments to celebrate the anniversary of the Unification, a 3-part event consisting of a fighting tournament, one where artists compete and are judged by the spectators to avoid the possibility of bias amongst the judges, and to give the people a voice, and lastly one where wandering minstrels and songwriters get a chance to have their voices heard. The first one I can understand, the second one I can understand to an extent, but why the third one? Tsunade asked. Believe it or not, but musicians played a large role in Niji's and my core back in the day, helping keep morale high and even compassing a few songs that they liked to sing or hum as we marched from battlefield to battlefield. Naruto told her. And morale is a major factor in any battle. Tsunade nodded. On more than a few occasions, morale is what lead us to victory. Naruto agreed. Those fights literally came down to which side broke first, and my core always held out until I defeated the enemy's commander. Once, one of our minstrels, a young former slave girl we named Mouse due to her quiet voice, even got close to the fighting, then started playing her flute. Don't ask me how it happened, but the sound of her music reached everyone and gave them a second wind. Naruto looked at his hands with a somber smile. Unfortunately, she was struck in the heart by a stray arrow, but that battle was pretty much over at that point. Several battalions who partook in that battle had her name etched into their respective memorial boards in remembrance of her actions and as a reminder that the even smallest of voices can be heard and have the greatest of impacts on any event. Tsunade nodded in acceptance. Even now, Naruto showed that he was still unpredictable. And the second tournament is, she asked. To showcase the art from all over the Yggdrasil Empire and her allies. It is to remind the people about the diversity that can be found throughout the empire. We are, after all, not a singular ethnic or cultural group, but numerous communities, all different from one another, and since most people cannot afford to travel abroad to witness the different cultures, I have decided to bring a part of those cultures here, so my people can see for themselves the variety that can be found in the world, then bring them home for those who couldn't travel. Alright, you convinced me. She said, crossing her arms. Naruto nodded as she left him to do his work. Later, council meeting. So are you thinking of inviting some people from Spring Country? Rimuru asked. Naruto nodded. And also some of the other minor nations of the eastern continent, yes. He answered. However, since anyone can apply for the tournament and we will be holding prelims a week before the actual tournament begins, which will be in 3 months from now, I am of no doubt that the people from the 5 major nations will try to dig their greedy fingers into the prize pool. That's a given. Izumi Curtis said as she leaned back in her seat. The independent merchant branch I asked to open in the east reported that of the 5 great nations, only Tsuchi and Mizu are economically and financially independent, so I don't think they will send many people to compete. Hei's no Kuni, thanks to its geography of being predominantly one huge desert, is financially and economically dependent on trade and the income from the missions for the shinobi, although we have started opening channels with them as per your orders some time ago. Apparently, the merchant council in Kei's capital is against the idea of trading with us through the IM and are threatening to blacklist their own shinobi from numerous stores and towns if the deal goes through. When their daimyo learned of this our merchants reported that he threatened to hang the representative of his own merchant guild. She gave a sigh. Currently the bottleneck for trade between us lies in the Kei's no Kuni's merchant guild and the IM. They're coming to an agreement on prices and stock choices, with the guild still trying to take the cream of the cake for themselves. Haminari no Kuni on the other hand has a reasonably stable economy, however their heavy funding of the military has left them pretty cash-strapped as of late. I believe they will send at least 6 of their jonin to participate once they hear word of this tournament. She continued. Including the Reikage and his younger brother, B. Everyone nodded, knowing full well what this meant. I no Kuni where to even begin. Ever since the old hag was ousted last year, the seat of leadership has passed on to some called Danzo Shimura, and I am saying this here and now, please blacklist anyone from that village from partaking in the tournament. For you to ask that, Izumi-chan, then this man must be a piece of work. Makarov spoke up. More so than some of the lads you are usually beating into shape. Naruto snorted. Piece of work is the major understatement of the decade. I don't know much myself, but he is known as the Dark Shinobi, and he used to lead a highly confidential and controversial Black Ops unit known as Root until Sarutobi Hiruzen ordered the group disbanded. I remember that old man. Sarutobi-san was well respected even at a young age amongst the Uzumaki. I shed a tear when you told us of his passing. Shanks said. I actually met Danzo once when he arrived in Uzushio to negotiate a new trade deal with us, under orders from the 3rd Hokage, he claimed. Turns out, he just wanted us to provide their Anbu with Uzumaki seals, including some of our Kenjutsu, which he shouldn't even have known about, since they were sealed away within our own versions of the Scroll of Seals. What kind of Kenjutsu are we talking about? Naruto asked, weary. Ever since he met Shanks and the other surviving Uzumaki, he'd been taking lessons in sealing from some of them, and thus knew firsthand just how powerful their seals could be, as in, first-hand experience memories from unfortunate clones. He still wondered why the hell there exists a seal that makes people's hair look and feel like the quills of a porcupine, something that Hinata found out the hard way during her first and only unannounced visit during one of Naruto's Fuinjutsu lessons under Shanks. Loyalty seals, seals that force the bearer to answer any question whilst being placed in a subconscious state, and time-death seals that are impossible to detect, are just the ones I know about, since I only know about them because of my former position as a scribe in the Uzushio Council. He answered. There are rumors that he also asked for access to our library, but that was thankfully turned down. Did they get any of those? Hinata asked. She shuddered, remembering what loyalty seals could do. As far as I know, the only ones we were willing to hand over were loyalty seals, though we gave him a far inferior version, since it takes a Grand Sealmaster to apply the complete seal at the base of the tongue. The inferior seal only paralyzes the bearer should they betray the one they are loyal to, not seal away any and all knowledge of their home, and fry any and all means of speaking vocally again. Shank said looking grim. 6 weeks later we sent our second princess, your mother, to Konoha to be the next host of the Kyuubi. Within a decade, Uzushio fell in the Third War. None of our pleas for help to Konoha were answered. You believe that Danzo may have had a hand in that then? Rimuru asked, hands clasped just underneath his chin and a contemplative frown on his face. Like everyone else on the council, the more he heard about Danzo, the less he thought of him. I wouldn't put it past him. Shank said. Even back then, he looked at the tree instead of the forest. His sole focus was just to make Konoha great, even if it meant committing genocide on any and all nations and people around them, ally or enemy alike. And just a week before Uzushio was attacked, we caught some of his root Anbu trying to break into one of our libraries, and we found the very loyalty seal we gave Danzo on his tongue. From him we managed to learn how many other root Anbu were in Uzushio, and we killed them before they could act out their own missions. Naruto sighed. Regardless, I have already agreed to make it so that anyone can enter. He looked up. However, I have not said anything about people bearing any of these seals, or seals in general, from not being monitored during their stay here in the West. Master Makarov, Rimuru team. He looked at the 2 people mentioned. And I entrust the 2 of you with discovering which people bear seals of any kind and have them put under watch. Already found one. Rimuru sassed only for Naruto. Snap, not me, you fool. At him, causing the two of them to enter a verbal conflict, whilst the rest of the council drank some of Iroh's tea and snacked on popcorn they brought along for occasions such as this. None of them ever regretted becoming part of this council because it was just so entertaining watching the two friends bicker. Phew, we are not friends. From two bickering friends. Time skip. The messengers to the minor villages were greeted differently depending on the village, but all left with friendliness more or less. Most of these small villages were relatively friendly to their respective envoys, with some of the more hardline villages such as Amegakure, Takigakure and the Nadeshiko village, giving the envoys a hard greeting, bordering on hostile. However, upon hearing the message that the messengers bore, only Amegakure maintained their hardline attitude, though they became far less hostile. The Takigakure actually did a near 180 and offered the messengers many gifts if they would bring their requests for trade to the emperor and signed up for all 3 tournaments. The male member of the envoy group to Nadeshiko actually had to clearly state that he was a married man and an expecting father when some of the Kunoichi there requested to duel him for his hand in marriage, simply because they heard that he is a veteran of the recently ended civil war and thus would bear them strong children. His companion, who happened to be his sister, giggled and told him, "Welcome to my world, bro. Now you know how I feel with all those fanboys." Anyway, Nadeshiko signed up for the first and third tournaments, though their leader, Shizuka, requested a meeting with the emperor, an. And we all can't see where this is going. Now on to the major villages. The Wagakure, as expected, agreed to participate in all 3 tournaments, though they only sent 3 representatives for each, not counting the group that would come as spectators or people wanting to gain knowledge on other villages in the empire. The other villages also sent a group such as this, so they won't be mentioned below. In total, their group would end up consisting of some 20 individuals, including contestants. Mizu also agreed to all 3 tournaments, however quite a number of people signed up. Their group consisted of around 30 signees, which was lowered down to 10 in the end, with another 23 spectators, including their cage. Tsuna didn't sign up for the music tournament, but a troupe of marionette-wielding shinobi signed up for the arts tournament, whilst about a dozen signed up for the fighting competition, the Kazukiage, Gaara, and his siblings included. In total, this group numbered 32, including participants. Kumo signed up a large number of their shinobi for the first competition, intending to win the prize money for Kumo, and as expected by the Yggdrasil Council, B and A both signed up. They openly admitted that Kumo stood no chance in the other tournaments. Their group numbered around 50 people, 30 of which were people who signed up to fight in the tournament, 5 were the Reikage's guards, and the rest were observers whose orders were to spot anything that could help strengthen Kumagakure. And lastly, Konoha. The envoys, Benmaru and Albus, threatened to flatten their defensive wall and large parts of Konoha with extreme firepower and lightning should Danzo try to use his hidden Sharingan on them again or threaten them with anything again. In the end, Danzo agreed to send some people to participate in the first and third tournaments, if only to spy on the western fighters and the participants of the other villages. Though he was internally swearing to kill these 2 envoys who threatened to cause damage to his great Konoha he had built. As they left Konoha territory heading to one of the Im's ports, the 2 envoys turned and massacred the root shinobi, who had been following them since they left Konoha, with exception to the ones they felt were only loyal to Danzo, due to the cursed seal. Those shinobi they captured and brought with them to the west, where one of their Uzumaki seal masters would work to remove those seals with minimal effect on their person. Meanwhile, in Spring Country, Naruto himself was giving the message to Koyuki and her court. The Yggdrasil Empire really likes to spoil us, don't they? Koyuki chuckled, which was mirrored by her council as they knew exactly what she was talking about. In the last year, their country has flourished thanks to their trade agreements with the Yggdrasil Empire. Whilst I can't speak for the shinobi in Yukigakure, I am willing to send some people for the music and the arts tournaments. She winked at her Minister of Arts and Culture, who chuckled. After all, Spring Country's artists and musicians are the most sought after in all of the eastern continent. And you still have a flair for dramatics, little breeze princess. Naruto sassed. Don't you go all sass on your elders, Naruto. Koyuki snapped at him. Whilst her reputation had caused a gale within the elemental nations, Naruto's reputation as the emperor had caused storms and he still didn't let her live it down. Elders? Where? Naruto said, dramatically looking around the room as though looking for elders. The samurai guards chuckled quietly at the sight. Whenever Naruto or Hinata came over to visit, they would always end up throwing sass after sass at each other like a pair of siblings would. Afterwards, Naruto and Koyuki discussed some further trade agreements, as well as the possibilities for a cultural exchange program between the elves, Tempest and Yggdrasil, and Spring Country for after the tournament. Turns out that Spring has some nice tea that is well liked amongst Yggdrasil's allies. Time skip. After Naruto returned to the west, he immediately got down to business by starting his morning the same way as always, having Hinata use her magic in the kitchen, after sending a generous amount of clones to start with the paperwork. Say, Hinata, what would you say to partaking in the tournaments? Naruto asked. I wouldn't mind partaking in the music one. Might break out my old harp. Haven't played it in a few weeks now. She answered. Unfortunately, you know that my status would cause some bias amongst the population. That is true. How about giving the opening for that tournament? Naruto asked. Tell you what. You participate in the fighting tournament, I'll do the introduction performance for the third tournament. She said with a smile. And maybe I'll make some of that special raiment for you. She purred. Deal. Naruto said, leaning in to give her a kiss when he winced. Something wrong? Hinata asked, seeing the wince. Yeah, my clones just read the roster for the first tournament. Naruto said. Half of Konoha must have put in their name, even the rest of the Konoha 11, as well as other people. Hinata quirked an eyebrow. That doesn't sound so bad. Might be good to see Kiba and Shino again. Naruto sighed. I'll show you the list later. By the way, why did one of your clones disperse? Hinata asked. He made a comment about the two of us and another clone hit him with a letter opener. Naruto said, then groaned as more memories appeared in his head. And now all of them are embroiled in a brawl. Are they idiots? But aren't they the same as you? Hinata asked jokingly. Since when were you into calling yourself an idiot? Don't you start with that again, Naruto growled. Or else what? Hinata asked with a cute smirk and a finger on her lower lip. Or else Naruto's face suddenly got a grin that sent a cold chill up her spine. I'll tickle you until you apologize. Hinata did not last long until she started laughing so hard she couldn't speak. She didn't realize that Naruto had a feather laced with itching powder hidden nearby. Time skip 3 days before the tournament's preliminary rounds begin. As the first of the ships carrying the people from the elemental nations arrived at the harbor of the small town, most of the visitors were openly criticizing the buildings. I thought that the empire was supposed to be great. Kiba said, looking around, seeing the repairs all over the place. This place looks worse than Konoha did after Orochimaru's invasion 7 years ago. Kiba, watch what you're saying. Ino snapped at him, slapping him over the head. Better listen to Blondie, mate. They and the rest of the Konoha group turned towards the speaker. They saw a tall red-headed man approach them, the 3 scars crossing his right eye, giving him a don't mess with me appearance. He was wearing a white shirt which was only buttoned up halfway and a black long coat. He wore worn brown pants that appeared to have been heavily patched and sandals. Strapped to his waist was a saber, with his hand resting on its hilt. Otherwise you can dock right next to the groups from Iwa and Kumo, both of whom are being led by their respective cages. His face then turned less stern. The truth however is that whilst the Emperor is setting aside quite a bit of the annual budget to repairs, the Empire is just so large that many places have yet to start with the repairs, even after a year had passed. And who are you? Kaharu asked, keeping a neutral tone. However her face showed that she saw him as beneath her. Your guide. The man said. But you can call me Akagami Shanks. One of the Yggdrasil's 2 naval commanders serving the Emperor directly. HN. Still not as high a position as an elite. Sasuke said arrogantly. An elite? Where? I don't see one. Shanks made a show of looking around, which infuriated Sasuke. Right here, you peasant. He roared. I am also the clan head of the all-powerful Uchiha clan. When I look at you, all I see is an orphan boy who has no right to that title, as the real clan heir, your brother, is still alive. Shanks said, narrowing his eyes and releasing some of his haki at the group, making many of them take a step back in shock or fall to their knees in fear. Now, with this minor inconvenience out of the way, shall we head over to the carriages and head over to the imperial capital, and get you quartered in. I am sure that you'd like to rest before being given a tour of the city. Several seasick groans were all the answers he needed. As he turned to leave, one of the rude Anbu that served as Danzo's guards tried to sneak away unnoticed. He did manage to sneak away, but was unaware that he himself was being shadowed by a member of the Assassin Brotherhood. But the group from Suna. Ara was one of the unfortunate people who suffered from seasickness, so he barely saw Legolas approach them. Welcome to the Yggdrasil Empire, Lord Kazakhiage and delegates from Wind Country. The elf prince greeted them formally. My name is Legolas Greenleaf too. I will be your guide for the duration of your stay. Ara, forcing his seasickness aside, returned the greeting and introduced everyone in his delegation. Your reputation precedes you, Lord Kazakhiage. It is rare that a man with a dark past such as yours rises to lead with respect and loyalty, as you do. Legolas said with a smile. But Iwa and Kumo landed on the same port and were greeted by 2 elderly people, a giant man who wielded a large naginata and wearing a white coat, and an old man with a gentle visage who was holding a teapot in one hand whilst warming it up using a flame originating from his hand. Greetings, delegations from Iwa and Kumo. The latter greeted the group. Welcome to the Yggdrasil Empire. My name is Iroh, next to me is Admiral Edward Whitebeard Newgate. We will be your guides for the duration of your stay. Tsuchikage, Anoki, strained his back trying to get a look of Whitebeard's face, making him fall to his knees in pain. As Ai and Kuritsuchi introduced everyone, Whitebeard leaned down and plucked Inoki from the ground before setting him down on his shoulder. Old men should see eye to eye, shouldn't they? He merely said. Inoki said nothing, 1 because his pride wouldn't allow him to agree, 2 because his back still hurt and 3 because he was actually enjoying the view he had from his perch. Many Iowa shinobi grumbled about lucky grouchy old bastards, but otherwise kept their jealousy under check. Gumo meanwhile was already being led away by Iroh towards their carriages that would take them first to their hotel, where they would be staying, and then onwards for a tour of the city. With Kiri and the smaller villages, the delegation from Kiri were met by Master Makarov. Alongside him was his grandson, Laxus, who was a bit late as he was evading his fan club. Fourth Mizukage, Mei Terumi, I presume. Makarov spoke up. Mei nodded. That's me. And you are. Makarov Dreher, current head of the Mages Association of Yggdrasil, guildmaster of the Fairy Tale Guild, and holder of a dozen other titles that none of you would understand. Makarov answered. Suddenly a bolt of lightning struck the ground next to Makarov, making the shinobi tense and ready themselves for battle. Relax everyone. Makarov told them with a sigh. This man is my grandson, Laxus Dreher. This is just his method of evading his fan club. The horror of anybody. I wonder how the emperor managed to keep his fan club at bay. Laxus grumbled. Maybe you should just ask Mira-chan for help with that. Makarov answered. Because the emperor has her to keep the fangirls at bay. She will kill me if I ask her. Laxus muttered. What are you talking about? Chijiro asked, voice filled with uncertainty. Oh, just the joys horrors of fangirls. Makarov and Laxus answered together before glaring at each other. Anyway, we will be your guides during your stay in Yggdrasil. We hope that you will enjoy your stay. Laxus told them. And for God's sake, please don't get any ideas. I am not available. He directed the last part at Mei, whom he smelled some certain pheromones from. He means that he already has someone he fancies. Makarov said with a smirk. But Nadeshiko, Shizuka and her group from Nadeshiko encountered Naruka, who bluntly greeted them with these words. Greetings, Amazon Brigade from the east. I am Uzumaki Naruka and I will be your guide. Yes, I am a woman and yes, I have been chosen so that none of you get any moronic ideas, such as challenging each and every strong young man you see to a stupid duel for their hand in marriage. Just so we are clear, that shit is not allowed in the tournament, so win or lose, you ain't getting fucked here. So, any questions other than what the hell I am talking about? Boy, there were many of those, all of them about what the hell she was talking about. When would it be possible to make an appointment to meet the emperor? Shizuka asked. Naruka looked at her for a moment, then sighed. I will see what I can do. Ani-san will be very busy with the tournaments and all that. Ani-san? Some of the Nadeshiko Kunoichi asked. He saved my life several years ago, and I kinda adopted him as my older brother. Naruka answered with a shrug, omitting a huge chunk of the truth there, but they were better off not knowing anyway. You will understand better once you actually have met him. With the contingent from Spring Country, Koyuki stepped into the carriage assigned to her and came face to face with 2 old friends. I trust your journey here hasn't been too stressful on you, Koyuki. Oh, you know, the usual, me enjoying the sea breezes whilst my guards all were confined to their cabins with seasickness. She answered with a smile. I hope that you two still remember our deal, so I'd like an update on that. The 2 others in the carriage gave an awkward laugh whilst blushing a bit. Yeah, about that, Koyuki sighed. Naruto Hinata, you two are the rulers of the empire, people will be expecting you two to produce an heir soon, and I can't wait to be a godparent, so get on with it already. But the other smaller shinobi villages, all of the smaller shinobi villages were met with high-ranking individuals, though the AIM group, consisting of the Akatsuki and a small group of AIM Jonin, got Izumi Curtis, who grapples Haiden into submission when he attacked her after she insulted his intelligence. Finally, a civilian of all people managed to shut him up. Pay up. Kakuzu said, holding out a hand for the cash that Kisame and Dodara, who both grumbled, handed over. 10 days later, the stadium shook with the roars as people cheered. My people, nearly a year ago, we ended centuries of strife. Naruto said. Let these next few days be dedicated to those who made it possible. Another round of cheers greeted his words. Therefore, I proclaim the beginning of the first tournament. The entire city shook with the cheers this time. Naruto nodded to the referees to take over as he walked into the shade together with the other contestants, most of whom looked shocked that he would be participating. Before we begin the battles, the first of 4 referees began speaking, quietening the crowd somewhat. Allow us to explain the rules and proceedings for the upcoming battles. She was a tall blonde brown-eyed woman wearing a dark blue dark green uniform that many recognized as the uniform of the Civil Services Office. This was Riza Hawkeye, a former soldier who retired when her home country joined the empire. She was one of the higher-ranked members of the CSO, her role being primarily to train the new recruits in handling firearms and not shoot themselves as was the case quite often. 1. Killing is prohibited. Should that happen, charges will be pressed according to given circumstances. the second referee said. This was Laxus Dreher, who was not participating because he lost a rock-paper-scissors match against Natsu of all people. Even now, 2 months after said match, Murahin still didn't let him forget it, that damn demon, too. The initial matches will all take part 4 at a time. The third referee announced, as 4 large squares around the arena floor, including where the referees were standing, rose a couple of feet up. The referee was a red and black-themed swordsman who carried a massive sword on his back. His hair was black and he had sharp orange eyes and a wide-brimmed hat. This was Dracul Mihik, current holder of the title of strongest swordsman and a former pirate who now ran a floating dojo that taught lots of things from swordsmanship to hand-to-hand combat to staff fighting. 3. Each platform will be surrounded by a barrier, however, it is ill-advised for the participants to actively try to destroy said barriers, as their main function is to protect the spectators. The fourth referee, Makarov Dreher, said. 4. Crippling injuries, depending on severity, can be considered by the referee as a reason to call the match in favor of the attacker. Riza said. This also means that you will listen to the referee. Failure to do so can lead to expulsion from the entire tournament. As the 4 referees moved to their assigned platforms, a 5th person walked into the middle. In order to break the ice, His Majesty the Emperor has allowed a demonstration match to be held between him and anyone who wishes to test himself against the Guardian of Yggdrasil. The newcomer said. This was Najenda wearing a form-fitting black army uniform adorned with numerous medals and insignias. Participants of the first tournament are discouraged to volunteer to prevent the possibility of handicap matches. Fuck that. Came echoing from the Konoha participants as Sasuke strode forward as if he owned the world. I'll show that I am superior than your fake emperor and that he has no right to sit on my throne. Uchiha. Stand down, now. Came the call from Torin, one of Danzo's bodyguards. He, Fu and Danzo had noticed the effect Sasuke's words had on the general populace, who were glaring at the little shy the Uchiha. Danzo meanwhile shook his head with a sigh. Sasuke had always been a handful, even when Tsunade was still Hokage. No. I've been held back enough. I shall show the world that the Uchiha clan is still the most powerful. Sasuke said, flipping him the finger. Next to Danzo, the other Kages looked at him with a microgram of pity. You should have kept that one on a tight leash, Hokage. Inoki stated. Unfortunately, he was like that before I took office. Danzo said. More like stole the hat, Darry muttered, lower than anyone could hear. Agenda turned to Naruto, who nodded before unclipping his robe, revealing leather armor covering his upper body, shoulders and waist. On his forearms were long metal braces and he wore similar equipment on his legs. On his hands were armored gauntlets and he wore a sword on his waist. Lastly, his face was still covered by his mask and his hat. Hinata giggled, looking forward the humiliation that was to come, and because the guards behind her were taking bets on how many moves Naruto would need to defeat Sasuke. As Naruto and Sasuke faced each other from across the platform, Najenda stood between them. You two have heard the rules. Your Majesty, you ready? She asked. Naruto nodded. Participant Uchiha, are you ready? Najenda asked. Sasuke grunted, arms crossed. Okay, then fight. Najenda said before jumping back. You should just give, Sasuke said, before noticing that the Emperor was no longer standing before him. No, he was sitting and sipping tea. You spend so much time talking nonsense that I had enough time to brew some tea. Naruto told him. Seriously, you are so slow that it's no wonder why you can't regrow your clan. Your partner must have gotten bored of you by the time you got going. You dare, Sasuke roared as he charged the Emperor, who dodged him with ease, still sipping his tea without spilling a drop. Is that all? Naruto asked, getting bored. Is this really all the so-called strongest is capable of? Shut up and die. Sasuke roared before sending a fireball at Naruto, who simply swatted it away using his teaspoon and a generous amount of chakra. Honestly, Naruto began speaking, getting everyone's attention. I am surprised you have made it this far in life. The end will be quick. I shall give you the honor that it will be an Eastern technique that I have been taught that I will use to defeat you. Just die already. Sasuke said, feinting and sending a punch at the Emperor only to phase right through him and after image hit into Jutsu Aogi. Naruto said, appearing behind Sasuke with his hands in a tiger sign. Sasuke saw the next few minutes in painful slow motion. He was familiar with the technique he instinctively knew was coming. Senengarashi. Naruto sent Sasuke crashing through the barrier, screaming. Everyone in the stadium winced, a few from past trauma of having been on the receiving end of that technique, whilst others winced from seeing Sasuke break through the barrier. However, the majority winced because of the sound that came out of Sasuke's mouth, had no business coming out of a male's mouth. Winner, His Majesty the Emperor. Najenda announced. And someone go fetch that young man an ice pack. Shortly afterwards, now that we are back to where we need to be, let's decide the matchups. Najenda announced as a covered box was brought to her. She put her hand under the cover and grabbed 2 slips of paper after making a show of mixing the contents. "And Chijuro from Kurigakure and Berserker Naruka please go to platform 1. Nagenda called out before repeating the previous process 3 more times. Amoy and Tamari were sent to platform 2, Gimli son of Gloin and the Kirinon wielding the Kabutoari were sent to platform 3, and Guy and one of the Iwa Jonin went to platform 4. I apologize in advance, but I am no good at writing multiple prolonged battles, so the battles as such won't be highly detailed, but I will do my best nonetheless. Also, I have compiled a list of combatants and literally rolled a couple of dice to make the matchups to ensure some form of randomness. Platform 1, Chijuro and Naruka looked at each other, Naruka giving him a blank stare, whilst Chijuro was busy keeping his nerves under control. "Chill the fuck out already." Naruka suddenly snapped, making the poor Miss Swordsman nearly literally jumped out of his shoes. "You're so tense it is annoying." "I can't help it," he said. "Both of you ready?" Riza asked. Naruka nodded whilst Chijuro gave a hesitant one. "Then, fight." Chijuro immediately jumped backwards and was grateful for it when Naruka appeared where he had stood, a golden gauntlet with long sharp claws on her hands that he had not seen before, the ground shattered under her golden gauntlet-clad fist. Where did those come from? Chijuro wondered, looking at said gauntlets, seeing the equally golden spikes claws on them. Next thing he knew, he was dodging the claws that shot out together with chains, trying to ensnare him. "Iramekure Kaiho," he shouted, his sword glowing blue as the bandages shredded. At the same time, he battered away all 8 chains that were heading for him. "Behind you, chum." He suddenly heard behind him and twitched. "Shy" was all he said before 2 more chains appeared and wrapped him up. Before he could utter another word, he was lifted up and slammed into the ground, head first multiple times. With one final throw, she buried him in the hard platform, his lower body, still visible above the ground, twitched sporadically. When he didn't move any more than that, Naruka crouched down next to him and began poking him with a stick that she pulled out of her cleavage. Naruto still wonders. A. Why the hell she carries a stick there, and B. What else she hides in there, since he saw her pull out something akin to a baseball bat from there, then a complete first aid kit, then a stuffed teddy bear, and lastly that what she was actually looking for, a bottle of strong sake which she used to disinfect some poor bugger's wounds. "Gramps, I think he's out," she commented. "Couldn't you have held back even a bit?" Riza asked. "No. His twitching pissed me off," she answered. "Twitchy bastard would jump at each and every mouse that scurries along his path." Riza sighed before proclaiming Naruka as the winner. Meanwhile, in the stands, Mei Terumi sighed at seeing her aide defeated with relative ease. He was a good fighter, but only once his blood got going and he got his confidence together, which took longer than what his opponent gave him. "Something tells me that this will be a trend for the fighters from the West Inoki," that Tsuchikage said, before looking at platform 4, where his Jonin was currently getting his ass handed to him by someone who was easily one of the foremost Taijutsu masters in the entirety of the Eastern lands. Platform 2. Laxus looked at the 2 contestants, simply nodded, and told them, "Well, get on with it. I'll intervene when things go too far." "The heck is that supposed to mean?" the wielder of the Kabutoari asked. "I mean, how can someone as short as shit?" he screamed as Gimli's twin-headed battle axe cut a deep groove into the hard ground where he stood and subsequently followed up with sharp and powerful swings from his backup when that axe got stuck. "Never underestimate a dwarf," Gimli said, blocking a strike from the shinobi, only for his current weapon to be cut in 2 when the Kiri-nin slammed the hammer portion of his weapon onto the back of the cleaver axe. "Interesting," Gimli said as he delivered a strong punch into the Kiri-nin's face, sending him reeling back. "And weak," was added as he walked over to his prized battle axe and wrenched it out. "Weak? My weapon just destroyed yours," the Kiri-nin said. "Only because I hadn't known about the limitations to that weapon of yours," Gimli said, gripping his axe with both hands and charging forward. Sparks flew as the 2 bladed weapons collided, but before the hammer could connect, Gimli disengaged and watched as the Kiri-nin sent his cleaver axe deep into the ground, getting lodged in the process. Next thing he knew, the Kiri-nin had the sharp blade of Gimli's axe at his throat. "Winner, Gimli, son of Gloin," Laxus declared. "How? The ground should have been destroyed by my weapon," he said. "My people have helped create these platforms. They are made from a special mortar that is hard yet can be easily pierced or cut. We use it ourselves in our own training fields since it is easier to repair, since we just pour in some more of the mortar instead of having to fill in entire craters," Gimli explained, helping the Kiri-nin to dislodge his weapon from the ground. "On the downside if things like this happen, it's a pain in the ass to get the weapons out." Platform 3. Tamari and Amoy looked at each other, each going over what they knew of the other. Amoy knew that Tamari was a long-ranged wind specialist with a habit of just about sending anyone flying whom she believes is hitting on her. He also knew that he could negate her advantage of range somewhat thanks to the restrictions of the platform. Tamari on the other hand only knew that Amoy was a close-range melee fighter who uses predominantly lightning attacks. Theoretically, if she maintained her distance, she should hold the advantage. Are the two of you ready? Mihik asked. Neither contestant nodded, too focused on the opponent to hear him. Sighing, he looked at Naruto, who threw him an alarm clock set to go off in 15 seconds. What do I do with this? Mihik asked, before reading the note attached to the clock. Tuck this between them, then get out of the barrier. So he did, and 5 seconds later was glad that he did because it exploded with a loud bang. Fortunately for everyone else in the arena, the sound was all but nullified by the barrier around the platform, and all they saw was a small burst of smoke and 2 shinobi who were on the ground clutching their heads. Now that you two are paying attention, you can begin whenever you want. He said, getting nods from the 2 combatants once they recovered. Amoy immediately charged Temari, who jumped back and began gliding on her fan, but he followed her, charging his sword with electricity that he sent at Temari, who blocked it with a wall of wind. Nice try. Temari said with a smirk. You will have to move faster than that, Slowpoke. This from someone who once lost to a lazy guy? Amoy asked, making Temari flinch. Shikamaru saw the flinch and muttered that Amoy had just made a big mistake. Something that both Gaara and Kankuro mirrored. Sure enough, Amoy found himself hard-pressed when Temari decided to go on the offensive. Don't you dare bring that up, you bastard. Temari growled and Amoy realized that he should have maybe kept his mouth shut for once, only to begin his usual conversation listing every worst-case scenario he could think of, giving Temari enough time to close her fan, get in close, and begin beating the crap out of him. Off to the side, Carrie and Samui sighed and face-palmed in well-experienced unison as Temari sent Amoy into unconscious oblivion until Mihik stopped her, proclaiming her the winner. Platform 4, I and the Iwa Jonin glared at each other. Despite not being at war with each other or having had any direct conflict with each other since the Third Great Shinobi War, however, this animosity was deeply ingrained from decades of warfare between the two nations. The two of you ready? Makarov asked. When both nodded, he called, then, begin. Flame of Youth. Guy roared, rushing his opponent, who leapt back in an attempt to make space whilst going through hand signs. Oten. Domu, he said as his skin turned near black. The moment he landed he was grateful that he knew that technique because he felt Guy's kick that connected with his chin. As he flipped over, he used the momentum to try and kick Guy in return. Both fighters landed in a heap but quickly got back to their feet. They continued to trade blows until Guy managed to subtly lead his opponent into a corner before opening the first gate and delivering a series of lightning strikes that sent the Iwa Jonin flying off the platform. Winner by ring out, Might Guy of Konoha. Makarov announced before watching Guy approach the Iwa Jonin, who was getting back to his feet. That was a most youthful fight. Let's have another one when circumstances allow it. He said loudly, holding out a hand. I'd rather not. His opponent said, taking the hand and pulling himself up. If it weren't for my jutsu, I am sure that my neck would be broken by now, to say nothing of the rest of my bones that you punched and kicked. Or you could just sit down and have a beer. Makarov said, making both of them jump as they had not realized that he had moved up right next to him. What a youthful idea, little old man. Guy boomed. Meanwhile, up in the stands, Inoki was shaking his head at the madness that was going on down below, the madness known as Konoha and Iwa Shinobi, getting along over something as insignificant as a drink. A few minutes later, Naruto rejoined Hinata in their booth where she rewarded his victory with a long kiss, thankfully hidden by the fly netting that had been put up whilst the first round of fights were going on. Did you enjoy defeating him? She asked. I was honestly expecting more of a fight, goes to show just how strong we have become since arriving in the West. He answered. And is it just me, or is that your little sis over there being approached by that one pickup artist? She turned and saw that it was indeed Hanabi and that she was indeed next pickup artist, one whom she recognized. Oh no he doesn't, she said and rushed out of the room, pausing when Naruto called over to her. You going to kill them? He asked. Nah, just give them a lesson they'll never forget. She said, before motioning 2 of their guards to follow her. Naruto sighed, before turning his attention back to the fights, where the next set of fighters were being drawn by Nagenda. The second set of fighters are Uchiha Sasuke of Konoha vs. A from Kumo. Nagenda announced. Would both combatants please head over to the first arena? She then drew another set of papers. Brave Fullbuster and Izumi Curtis, please head over to arena 2. Nagenda announced. Izumi walked over to her position, confidence clear by her stride alone. Gray not so much, he hoped that he would remain conscious enough to witness the rest of the fights. Mifune of Tetsu and Lord Irachi of the Samurai Order, please go to arena 3. Nagenda called out. Mifune was an old man wearing old samurai armor, with long gray hair and an equally long beard. Irachi was a middle-aged man with midnight black hair, cut short, and a neat goatee. 1. Natsu Dragneel and Akeuki of Nadeshiko, please go over to arena 4. Nagenda called out. I'm fired up. Natsu yelled as he sprinted over to the arena, his opponent taking her time to walk over instead. Let the second round of matches be. Nagenda was interrupted by a shrill scream coming from the audience. 5 minutes earlier, Hanabi sighed, trying her best to ignore the advances of the not-so-gentleman next to her. She was on her way back from buying a drink for herself and her friend, Mogi, when the guy walked up to her and began lavishing her in praises, with another equally not-so-gentlemanly pickup artist doing the same to Mogi. Why did it have to be me? She asked herself as the guy started throwing a new set of compliments at her. Look, I am not interested, so at least let me try to change your mind, oh beautiful mountain flower. He interrupted her. Why is she being so difficult? She is almost as stubborn as the Empress, back before she got married to that little punk who became the Emperor lucky prick. Hanabi's response was interrupted by someone clearing their throat behind them. I'd appreciate it if you had heeded my warning from all those years ago, Mr. Unable to score with the ladies. Hanabi, Mogi and the two pickup artists turned, the former's face brightening upon seeing who it was, the second one cocking an eyebrow, since she seemed to recognize the woman who had spoken, and the latter two paling, before the second pickup artist disappeared as fast as he could, the first however frozen in fear, remembering her threat from back then. Short flashback, 3 months before Hinata and Naruto's marriage. I swear, Hinata said, holding the pickup artist's throat with one hand, whilst holding a rusty hatchet in the other. If I find you hitting on another girl in my presence or line of sight again, I'll have your balls removed and fed to the dogs. Flashback end. The pickup artist still had nightmares of that day. Do I know you? He asked, trying to feign ignorance. Not me personally, no. Hinata answered, before motioning one of her guards forward. But I believe that the two of you will be well acquainted after this. The guard took off her helmet, revealing shoulder-length white hair and emerald green eyes. Sir Cyrilla Fiona Elin Rhiannon, 2, by order from the Empress, you are free to deliver just punishment on this person. Hinata said in a clear voice. Siri grinned whilst the poor man slunk away, only to be grabbed by Hanabi and Mogi. What's the matter? Hanabi asked in a cutesy voice. I thought you wanted to spend time with a pretty lady. Mogi added, unable to keep a smirk from her face. Here is one trying to spend some quality time with you now. If possible, the man paled even further. Siri had a reputation for having never failed to hospitalize each and every playboy, pickup artists, thug, thief and rapist that crossed her path, except for maybe the very first, because he allegedly was never heard from again. All she ever said about that one was a specialist took care of him. And now, he was in her crosshairs, so he did the only thing that he could think of: scream like a little bitch for help and mercy. Back in the arenas, as I was about to say before that man-woman interrupted, let the matches begin. Nagenda announced as though nothing weird had happened. Arena 1. Sasuke glared at A, who huffed and appeared to not take this seriously. You will lose this battle, old man. Sasuke growled as he called upon his chakra. If you intend to bore me to death, then yes. A said, riling Sasuke up to great effect. With a roar, Sasuke charged in, Chidori chirping as he intended to finish it quickly. Only to be blindsided by A, who caught his hand in a lightning-clad hand of his own, neutralizing Sasuke's lightning. Trying to use a lightning jutsu against the undisputed master of lighting users in all of the elemental nations, you have some guts. A grunted. Maybe you aren't as weak as your match against the Emperor made you to appear. That jutsu managed to nick my skin. Sasuke growled as he tried to kick A, only for him to catch that as well, before surprising A by firing a point-blank, full-powered fireball into his face. Sasuke smirked, thinking he had gotten him. You little shit. A roared as Sasuke suddenly found himself being thrown through the air and out of the arena bounds. You singed my beard. Do you have any idea how long it takes for the smell of burned hair to disappear? The smoke cleared to reveal A standing there in his full body Raten no Yoroi, with the tip of his goatee singed black. Winner by ring out, A from Kumagakure. Riza announced, whilst Sasuke, furious at the loss and at the fact that his sneak attack did so little damage, stomped away, swearing vengeance for this humiliation. While he was walking, he overheard some of the civilians say that Uchiha Gai's combo was excellent. Indeed, his opponent, whilst clearly far more experienced than him, was still caught off guard and failed to get that defensive technique of his up in time. A second civilian said. It helped ease Sasuke's anger somewhat, but not enough to care. Arena 2. Laxus felt a pint of sympathy at the brutal beatdown that was happening in front of him. Gray had started out by coating the entire floor in ice before sending several icicles at his opponent, one of the few people with whom he, Laxus, has a good relationship with and still is scared shitless of. Reason being that his attacks were rendered useless when she transmuted the damn ground she was standing on into lightning rods, then proceeded to do to him what she was currently doing to Gray. Clapping her hands, Izumi transmuted the ice and ground she was standing on into a wall that protected her from the projectiles, and clamping his feet and lower legs in transmuted granite. The hell, Gray asked, then realized that Izumi had closed the distance between them. Rule no. 1. Never give your opponent the chance to fight back. She said, then proceeded to literally tie Gray's arms and legs into some strange semblance of a human Gordian knot. Rule no. 2. Shut up. I am still speaking. Izumi shouted at Gray, who was roaring in pain. Winner by tying her opponent up literally Izumi Curtis. Laxus announced. Now, please untie him. He got tied up by a housewife, he should be able to untie himself. Izumi called out, earning many cheers and confirmations from the crowd. Arena 3. The battle between the two samurai was, for a lack of a better term, a deadly dance, graceful in its fluidity, strong in its movements, and deadly should either one of the contestants make a single mistake. Mifune and Irachi were trading, dodging and parrying the other's blows before, at some unknown signal, both jumped back and both caught their breath with the biggest smiles on their faces that anyone had ever seen. It has been many decades since I have faced an opponent such as yourself. Mifune said. Likewise is what I would like to say. Irachi answered. Unfortunately, I last faced someone of your caliber just over a year ago. I was just beginning to get used to the piece. Nearby, Mihawk was grinning. He enjoyed it when swordsmen spoke to each other truthfully and with respect. He gained some respect for the Eastern Samurai because he himself knew just how strong Irachi was. He considered Irachi to be one of the top 50 swordsmen in the West. He could safely say that Mifune was Irachi's equal, despite their age difference. Soon, the two samurai resumed their deadly dance, sparks flew as their blades connected, and then just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped, with Mifune's sword a hair's breadth away from Irachi's neck, whilst Irachi's sword pointing at a gap he had cut into Mifune's armor, where his kidneys were located. "As we tie," Mifune said, with Irachi nodding in agreement as both withdrew their swords in unison and sheathed them, giving each other a bow of respect. As the two of them bowed to each other, Mihawk announced, "Since the rules do not take into account a draw, I have no idea how to proceed. The verdict shall be given after the other fights have been resolved." Arena 4. Akiyuki looked at Natsu, trying to gauge his overall capabilities. From his outward appearance, she estimated him to be a physically fit specimen of a man, and she just realized what she had been thinking, which tinted her face a rosy pink. "Well, then, you may begin when ready," Makarov said, before stepping to the side. "Why do you smell so funny? Are you on your period?" Natsu asked. "Yes, wait, what?" Akiyuki turned bright red, before charging Natsu. "Die." Her charge came to a screeching halt when she saw Natsu engulf his hands in flames, her instinct shrieking at her not to get hit by those flames. "What now? I've been waiting for you to come charge in so we could brawl it out, but you just stop." Natsu groaned. "But I am a little girl," Akiyuki said, giving him her best attempt at the puppy eye jutsu. "Don't you know it is bad manners to hit a lady with fire and flames?" Lisana and Lucy both said something about that some time ago, Natsu said, apparently thinking, his flames dispersing. Inwardly, Akiyuki was smirking in victory until what Natsu said next shattered all her preconceptions about him. "But they never said anything about fire and flame and lighting," he said with a blinding smile, as his whole body was consumed by fire and lighting. "Thunder flame dragon's roar," Natsu bellowed as a typhoon of fire and lighting sent her flying into the barrier. "Winner by ring out, Natsu Dragneel," Makarov announced. "Wendy, can you heal her up?" "Humming, master." A young blue-haired girl ran up. She arrived to see Akiyuki crying her heart out. "What the hell is with the people in this land? I want to go home," she cried. There. Natsu Nai was just being himself. Wendy counseled her as she began healing her injuries. "What the hell is he though? And are you his sister? Why would he go all out in a spar, especially with a girl like me?" Akiyuki continued. "Natsu and I are not siblings, but he is a brother all the same," Wendy said with a smile. "And he was actually going easy on you. And it doesn't matter to him whom he fights, he never backs down from a fight, except for maybe his two girlfriends and Urza-san and Master Makarov." Akiyuki wanted to deny reality right then, but couldn't. "Fuck this shit, I am so gonna stay away from the West forever," she thought to herself. "Even if they have some crazy hot people here, even if they would dare to hit a lady Kami, where have I gone wrong in life?" But the other contestants, despite her fellow Nadeshiko Kunoichi's defeat, Shizuka couldn't help but smile. "I should have sent her here earlier," she said. "Why's that?" Naruka asked from her seat next to her. "Akiyuki is an oddball amongst Nadeshiko Kunoichi," Shizuka answered. "She strongly believes in the Nadeshiko way of only allowing stronger men to marry her and all that, but at the same time, she also believes that men aren't supposed to hit women. At least be glad that she fought in a tournament then," Naruka said. "Cause should she have joined us during the Civil War, she'd be dead by now." "Speaking from experience?" Shizuka asked. "I only joined Ani-san later, but even the handful of battles I partook in were brutal to say the least. Trust me when I say this, but war has no place for simplistic gender superiority bullshit mentally, gentleman shit believing types like her." Naruka pulled back the strap on her shoulder to reveal a scar running over her shoulder. "I got this during my first battle here in the West. Bastard got me good with that fucking halberd of his, gouged out a good chunk there. If it weren't for the blue-haired pipsqueak little sis tending to your comrade there, I'd have lost my arm." "What was she doing on the battlefield?" Shizuka asked, pointing at Wendy. She's stronger than she looks. Despite her size and age, if she gets serious, there are very few amongst the contestants here who can hold their own against her, myself included. She is truly a master of the winds. Naruto said with a smile. Unlike the rest of her brothers, she actually uses her head instead of her fists. Brothers? Shizuka asked. People like Natsu. Beat the shit out of you first, ask questions later types, all of them. Naruto explained. Probably why I get along with them so well. Back in the arena, now that this round is complete, we have met an impasse. Mihik announced. Since the match between Lord Irachi and Lord Mifune ended in a draw, it is time to decide who continues to the next round. For that decision, the Emperor has ordered me to leave the decision up to you spectators. Loud roars and shouts for both contestants erupted from the stands as people began chanting both Mifune and Irachi's name. You know what? At Mihik's words, the cheers stopped dead. Let's just let both of them through to the next round for a three-way cause, otherwise you lot will just keep chanting until the day is over. Mihik said. They have shown that they both deserve to be in the next round after all. Agreed. Naruto called out, which was mirrored by many of the spectators. Agenda stepped forward again to draw names. Samui of Kumo and Monkey D. Luffy, please head over to Arena 1. She called out. Shizuka of Nadeshiko and Inyazuka Kiba from Konoha, please go to Arena 2. E from Kumo and Nobari, 3 from Kiri, please go to Arena 3. The goal is Greenleaf of the Elves and Tetsu from Tetsu, please go to Arena 4. Nagenda called out the last match for the round. Arena 1, Shishishi. This should be fun. Never fought against a warrior from the east before. Luffy said. Likewise. Samui answered in a near apathetic voice. Thank the log he's not looking at my chest. Then immediately became irked when she saw his neck stretch and corkscrew, all the while looking at her. Arena 2. Let's go, Akamaru, let's show this bitch who is the alpha. Kiba said, with Akamaru barking in response. What do you mean I have a death wish? Number BARK number, are you kidding me? Kiba turned pale. If I win, I'll be. We have an agreement with the West that rule doesn't apply here. Shizuka said. Besides, you are not the type of person whom I'd consider in the first place as I already am looking for someone else. Who? Kiba asked, sighing in relief. A student of the Gama Senin. Shizuka answered. He made a pact with my sensei that their students would finish their duel at a later stage. With Naruto. Naruto turned to Jiraiya, who was pointedly looking elsewhere whilst whistling. What did you do? He asked. I may or may not have snuck into Nadeshiko to do some research about 20 years ago. Jiraiya confessed after Tsunade leveled a frosty glare at him. The leader of the time caught up to me after I had made my escape and challenged me to a duel for her hand in marriage. Despite not taking it seriously, we were evenly matched and destroyed a large part of the forest around us when I called of the match in favor of letting our students finish it. In other words, you didn't want to be bogged down by a marriage, despite being in your utopia. Tsunade asked. Guilty as charged. Jiraiya answered. This was back when I was still trying to garner your favor, before you and Dan became an item. And you didn't think about telling me this when you were teaching me? Naruto asked in a calm tone. It may have slipped my mind, Jiraiya answered weakly. He looked underneath the calm tone and wished he hadn't. You realize that should Shizuka request a battle with me for my hand in marriage, Hinata is going to neuter you, right? Naruto asked. Arena 3. I fly through the wind and sting like a bee. Shut the fuck up before I give you the iron claw. A roared at his brother's bad raps. Only for Nobari to start rapping as well, resulting in him and B having a rap battle, complete with funky hand motions and rap dancing. Oh gods, there are two of them now. Carrie and Amoy both whined whilst A was being restrained from delivering a double iron claw. Arena 4. At the neck and under the arms, Legolas said. Huh? Tetsu exclaimed. What do you mean? Your armor is weak at the neck and under the arms. Legolas answered. I have fought against beasts that had the same weaknesses in their own armor. Back with Nagenda, let the battles begin. Nagenda called out to the cheers of the crowd. Arena 1. Samui grabbed her tanto and rushed at Luffy, who readies himself to punch her. Gomu Gomu no, he said. Samui heard her sixth sense go off in her head like an air horn. Pistol. Samui immediately stopped charging in and jumped to the side, just as Luffy's arm extended. Missing her by less than an inch. Rolling to the side, she returned to charging in, swinging her tanto, only for it to be blocked by his arm, which now had taken on a black sheen. Sorry, but I can't afford to hold back here. He said, clenching his other fist. Hancock promised me an all-you-can-eat meat buffet if I win this tournament. Samui deadpanned, pausing for less than a heartbeat. It was all it took for the pain to happen. Gomu Gomu no Red Hawk. Samui was sent flying out of the arena, nearly hitting Legolas and Tetsu on her way past them, the two combatants sending glares at Luffy for interrupting them. Sorry. My bad. Luffy laughed off. Idiot Riza shook her head as she proclaimed Luffy the winner. Dr. Chopper, Miss Marvell, please tend to Miss Samui. But Chopper and Wendy, let's see, definite second-degree burn where Luffy hit her with a red hawk, possible concussion to the head and fracturing to the spine from impacting the arena wall. Chopper listed her outer injuries that he could immediately identify. Organs around the upper stomach show no signs of bleeding, just some bruising. Her brain and skull on the other hand appear to be alright. Some hairline fractures to her spine, but nothing some rest and treatment won't cure. Wendy said, her magic powering down. Let's get her to the shade where I can heal the bruised organs before Sensei takes a look at her. Chopper nodded before calling over a team of paramedics with a stretcher. Still Chopper turned to see Wendy suspiciously eyeing some of Samui's anatomy. What do they feed them in the East? Arena 2. It didn't take long for Kiba to decide that yes, he was having a bad day. Not only was his opponent very beautiful, but she also knew how to use her beauty to her advantage during a fight. By that, in Kiba's definition, she was fighting dirty. She was wearing a pencil skirt and Kiba got distracted each time she would try to kick him due to him seeing flashes of her panties. Her having a cleavage window didn't help him at all either. Up in the stands, his sister growled and muttered something about him. Deciding to pull out the big guns, Kiba and Akamaru tried to get Suga, however realized too late that Shizuka had laid out a trap for them as 4 seals appeared around them in a square, already activated. Almost immediately, Kiba and Akamaru felt their chakra being suppressed. Well, shit. Kiba grunted. Proctor, I forfeit. I have no means of getting out of this trap seal. Winner by forfeit, Shizuka of Nadeshiko. Laxus announced. How the hell do you manage to understand seals and Fujitsu? Kiba asked Shizuka. I can't make heads or tails of even the most basic theories. I don't either. Shizuka answered. I just know how to use seals. Kiba nodded. Naruto. Shizuka raised an eyebrow at him. The man you're looking for. He was trained by Jiraiya of the Sannin for a period around 7 years ago. Kiba clarified. His name is Uzumaki Naruto. Shizuka's eyes widened. I guess you aren't that much of a horndog and actually have a head on your shoulders after all. Kiba growled as he and Akamaru walked away, with Akamaru barking a comment. Shut up, Akamaru. I know that, but Naruto, that damn Inuzuka, Jiraiya muttered, feeling his imminent doom approaching nearer and nearer. That's what you get for your actions. Tsunade said with a smirk as Naruto sent glares at both Jiraiya and at Kiba, the one for organizing an impending conflict, the other for revealing his name. Arena 3. Mihik had never thought he'd feel sympathy for anyone who wasn't a swordsman until now. Never mind that the 2 contestants he was proctoring had turned a fighting battle into a bad rap battle. Both were supposedly swordsmen, given that one had 7 swords strapped to his back and the other one had a giant toothpick, but they seemed to have missed the memo, as when Mihik had signed up as a proctor, he specifically stated that he wouldn't partake in proctoring an art contest of any form other than 2 contestants artfully dancing around each other, artfully trying to either KO the other, throw the other out of the ring, or simply slice and dice the other one up. This bullshit right was not what he had signed up for. He and Nubari were deeply engrossed in a rap battle, supported by some wanted judges on the side holding up random numbers ranging from 0 to 10. Stop your rapping and fight, roared, but the 2 were too deeply engrossed in their rapping to hear or care. If you don't start fighting right now, I'll have both of you subjected to more than just your respective leaders' punishments. Mihik growled, drawing his sword slightly to emphasize his point whilst blasting the 2 rappers point blank with haki. He and Nubari stared blankly at him before Nubari flourished his blade with a twirl, only to pale when B went second stage Biju cloak, 6 tails, going, sorry brew, this not on you. Gotta not make this a draw, lest I get subjected to the iron claw. And thus B smacked Nubari out of bounds. But I am sure if we look around, there be a Karaic bar abound, how does that sound? He asked. Winner, the lame rapper from Kumo. Mihik announced, before batting B over to the contestant stand with his sheathed sword. Arena 4. Estu decided that he was not having a good day. Don't get him wrong, he enjoyed a good fight against a strong and honorable opponent. He just hated it when his opponent switched from ranged attack to melee faster than it takes to blink at random moments. For log's sake, Legolas was about to shoot him in the shoulder. The next thing Tetsu knew, there was his letter opener of a knife heading right for his spleen. Blocking that, he came face to face with an arrow. Dodging that, you get the idea. Screw this. Proctor, I forfeit. I am outclassed by him. He announced. You shouldn't feel upset. Legolas said, sheathing his weapons. You're strong enough to make me put in an effort there. You just need to learn not to think so much. Easy for you to say, young lad. Tetsu growled. Legolas smirked whilst someone in the contestant stand roared in laughter. I'll let you know that I am the oldest participant here, just a sprite over a few thousand years old in fact. Flash forward, that evening, Tetsu and the other samurai sat in their apartment's communal room. What do you think about your opponent? Mifune asked. He is a powerful warrior, though if all his kind age like he does, then I feel sorry for their men in general. Tetsu answered. Why is that? One of the other samurai asked. They say that women age like fine wine. But even fine wine turns to vinegar after a few hundred years, let alone a few thousand, Tetsu answered. Those women of there must be quite the sour bunch. Everyone who heard him just stared at him blankly. The Greenleaf was right, you really do think too much. Even Mifune joined the perfectly synchronized perfect deadpan comment. Flash forward end. Ladies and gentlemen, the next contestants are. Nagenda announced, fishing through the now half-empty barrel. Rock Lee of Konohagakure vs Hada Kakashi, also from Konohagakure. Please head over to Arena 1. Yasha Elite bellowed. I'll show the world my flames of youth. Kakashi simply walked over, little green book in his hand. Kuritsuchi from Iwagakure and Sujetsu from Kurigakure, please head over to Arena 2. Nagenda called out. Finally. I was getting tired of waiting. Kuritsuchi said. Sujetsu, you better not have been slacking off. The wielder of the Kiba blade said with a smirk. Else I will tell Mai-sama you have a thing for her. Shut it. Sujetsu growled, though he paled slightly. Sure, he had a small crush on his leader, however, at the same time he was scared shitless of her temper and her threats. Kankuro of Sunugakure and Yukata from Sunagakure, please go to Arena 3. Nagenda said. Kankuro and Yukata looked at each other and nodded. Lacey, Ryu from Iwagakure and Koyo from Tetsu, please head over to Arena 4. Meanwhile in the stands, Inoki was approached by a cloaked and hooded individual carrying a message. Lord Tsuchikage, the Emperor would like to invite you to the Royal Palace following today's tournaments. The man said with a bow. He said that you may bring up to 4 of your people if you so wish and apologizes for the abruptness of the invite. Tell the Emperor that I will accept, however, given my back, I may be late. Inoki answered. I'll inform him immediately. The man said and walked in the direction of the Emperor's booth. In said booth, Hinata followed by Hanabi entered the booth, big smiles on their faces. Mogi had decided to remain in the stands with the rest of the Konoha group, all but ordering Hanabi to spend some time with her sister, once she found out that they were sisters in the first place. Good day, Naruto Nai. She greeted Naruto, who smiled. Sup. Glad you didn't turn that chap into paste. You'll have to get in line for that. I believe Hinata has first dibs. He greeted her with a grin. Hanabi just stuck out her tongue, enticing a round of laughter. Arena 1. Kakashi and Lee looked at each other, serious expressions on their faces, with Kakashi having his Sharingan exposed. Just so you know, I shall not hold back, Kakashi-san. Lee said. Likewise. And I apologize in advance. Kakashi responded. You two ready? Riza asked. At their nods, she brought her hand down. Begin. Yasha Lee began, rushing Kakashi and engaging him with a furious taijutsu exchange. It didn't last long, because Kakashi tricked Lee into looking him in the eye and casting a Jinjutsu on him, then throwing him out of the arena boundary before Lee could dispel the illusion. That's a cheat skill. Lee said, accepting Kakashi's hand. That's why I apologized in advance. Kakashi responded. Cause Guy said the same thing during our first spar following the third war. And in order to defeat you otherwise might end up crippling you, this was the quickest and safest method. Winner by ring out, Kakashi of Konohagakure. Rise announced. Arena 2. Sujetsu said. Excuse me? Kuritsuchi asked. Laxus, who was about to start the match paused, having a bad feeling about this. Your sex appeal it's pretty low. Sujetsu said, drawing the giant cleaver from his back. Kuritsuchi became very quiet. In the stands, what is that idiot doing? One of the Kiri delegates asked. Riling her up. Aoi answered. Sujetsu excels in riling up his opponents, allowing him to utilize his clan's jutsu more readily whenever they make a mistake. Makes sense though maybe he shouldn't have used that card though. Mei said. Why? What will be coming his way? Aoi asked. Feminine fury. Came the collaborative response from everyone around him. Back in Arena 2. You two are clearly ready so allow me to at least get to safety before beginning. Laxa said, bringing his hand down and stepping back. He was dating Murahin after all. He knows all about feminine fury thanks to her periods. Good thing he did, because Kuritsuchi immediately began shooting Yoten. Quicklime jutsu at Sujetsu who, after realizing what the orbs of white-gray paste were, countered by spitting water bullets at the orbs, then using his sword sending them back at Kuritsuchi. Ought to do better than that, Missy. Sujetsu said, when suddenly his sword became heavy. Says the one who didn't realize that his sword is now covered in concrete. Kuritsuchi said with a triumphant smirk. When how? Sujetsu asked. My water bullets should have completely solidified your attack. Kuritsuchi smirked. That's what does indeed happen normally. However, you only formed a shell of hardened concrete around my personal variant of quicklime orbs. She pointed to one of the orbs near her which was cracked. And when you hit it with your sword, you broke that shell. Where do you think all the unhardened concrete went? Sujetsu's eyes widened and he looked down at his sword, which was completely encased in concrete. That's for saying I have no sex appeal, I'll let you know that I will find my significant other eventually she growled. Never take your eye off the enemy, chum. He heard his opponent say. Turning his head back, he just managed to see her launch another barrage of Jotun. Quicklime jutsu. This time, he wasn't able to do anything because a Jotun Bunshin appeared next to him and grabbed him, keeping him in place as he was covered in concrete. "Well, I'd say we have concrete evidence that Kuritsuchi of Iowa is the winner," Laxus commented, only to back away when Kuritsuchi sent him a scolding glare. "Leave the fucking puns elsewhere," she growled. And 40k plus other stories all involving the RWBY universe. Yang sneezed and wondered who took her place in pulling bad puns. Back to the story. Arena 3. "The two of you ready?" Mihik asked. Both Yukata and Kankuro asked. "Then begin." For a while, both contestants didn't move. Because each knew how the other fought, and the other knew this, and both also knew the weaknesses of the other, with both again knowing that the other knew this. "Please don't hold back against me, Kankuro-sama," Yukata said. "I wish to see how far I have come." Kankuro blinked before nodding somberly, pulling out a scroll. "I will." Black secret technique. From the scroll appeared 6 combat puppets, 1 that severed as a strong defender, 2 who wielded ranged weapons, 2 who carried either a sword or a scythe, and the last one made Yukata gulp because it was a trickster, built for speed more than anything else, it would swoop in whenever she lowered her guard. Naruto leaned forward, looking interested. "He has definitely improved since the last time I have seen him, during the Chunin exams all those years ago," he commented. "You know him, Naruto Nai?" Hanabi asked. "You could say that he is an enemy turned friend," Hinata answered. "Though the friendship is through Kankuro's brother rather than with him." "What did you do?" Hanabi asked, giving Naruto a dull stare. "During the invasion of Konoha 7 years ago, Gaara and I faced off in battle. I defeated him, became his friend, and ended him making him reconcile with Kankuro and Temari." Naruto shrugged. Looking back, not that impressive. If possible, Hanabi's stare turned even more dull. Back in the arena, Yukata was a simple girl. When fighting an opponent, she simply analyzed his or her habits and reacted to them. She had a simple daily routine. Wake up, eat breakfast, train in the morning, meet up with Mitsuri or eat lunch, head to Gaara's office to see if there was a mission for her, if not, head back home and service her gear, eat dinner, go to sleep. She saw danger incoming, she dodged out of the way. But when danger came from 5 different directions, things weren't as simple. "Gyuden. K's no hiki," she said, forming a wall of wind between her and the approaching puppets. But reaction. "You have definitely improved since last time," Kankuro said, pulling back his puppets. "Aw, shucks, Kankuro-sama. Don't be like that," she said, rubbing the back of her head. Another thing about Yukata was that she was easily distracted by praise from people she knows, something that prevented her from being promoted to Jonin. And it was this distraction that Kankuro exploited. "Winner, Kankuro of Suna," Mihik announced. "The little girl really needs to fix that weakness of hers for all the potential she has." He muttered the last bit. Arena 4. This was less of a battle and more of a situation of Ryu trying not to get hit by Koyo, who was too bloody fast with that katana of his, not to mention the fact that Koyo pushed chakra into his blade, making it strong enough to withstand cutting through the rocks Ryu sent at him. "Proctor, I forfeit," Ryu called out just as Koyo's blade stopped inches away from his neck. "Koyo-san has shown that he can counter most anything I can throw at him with little to no effort. I see no way to defeat him," Ryu explained. Makarov nodded as Koyo sheathed his sword and bowed, with Ryu returning the gesture. "Winner, Koyo of Tetsu," the short old man announced. "Ryu, was it? It takes strength to acknowledge that one is outmatched. It takes greater strength to admit defeat. And the greatest strength comes from learning from these occurrences." Makarov gave the Iwan in his grandfatherly smile. Ryu nodded, giving him a small smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will take a short break as refreshments are brought out. Please ensure that you drink enough, for we still have 2 rounds to go through today," Nagenda announced. "With Naruto, after the break, and all that since the last time Dad and I sent a letter." Hanabi finished recounting the last 2 months of her life. "And you 2 never told me you were the fucking emperor and empress," she finally snapped, having hidden her shock well. Anada smacked her behind the head lightly. "Language," she admonished her sister, whilst Naruto just chuckled. "We wanted it to be a surprise to you and Hiashi Otu-san," he explained. "Though, it seems as though he hasn't traveled with you, has he?" Hanabi sighed. "He's been nominated the chief ambassador to the minor countries surrounding Hai no Kuni. Hokage team sent him to one such lands a week before we left. Last I heard, he had safely arrived in the Yumi no Kuni, something about using them as a middleman to trade with other countries across the sea to the east." Naruto nodded. His agents in the elemental nations had mentioned that Yumi no Kuni was probably the only nation with open borders to Hai no Kuni, though this was about as far as the relationship went, especially after Konoha shinobi allegedly tried to steal a sizable part of Yumi's trade fleet. "Smart move on the part of that mummy," he commented. "It would be better if that bastard of a Cage were to pass away, honestly." Hanabi sighed. He has turned the entire economy of Konoha and surrounding villages and town into simple sources of money to run the military, only stopping there because the daimyo personally commanded him from stopping this. Naruto and Hinata winced. That could not end well. What about the clans? Naruto asked. Can't they call for a vote of no confidence? The Kurama clan did. They were all found slaughtered the next day. Hanabi said. Danzo's route has taken over the entire Anbu and they follow Danzo's command to the letter. As long as the clans don't do anything radical, clan-born shinobi and civilians still live as they did under Godame-sama. Naruto sighed. Seems like things were worse than he had thought. They paused to hear the next lineup of contestants. Round 5 will consist of Shikamaru Nara of Konoha vs Lady Oda, the wave dancer in Arena 1. Shikamaru looked at a silver-haired woman a year or so his senior wearing samurai armor and wielding a kanabo. A weapon he found too troublesome to want to be hit with. Leonora Volteria, 1, of the 7th Army vs Dari of Kumagakure in Arena 2. The Raikage's right-hand man looked to see his opponent and saw a beautiful white-haired lady wearing revealing, lightweight armor, ornate sword at her side, walking up to the arena. What a drab, he muttered. Diba from Kurigakure vs Haru from Testu no Kuni in Arena 3. The two swordsmen glared at each other, lightning sparking between the two of them. You two know each other? Mihik asked. This bastard mocks my swordsmanship whenever we fight. The two contestants answer in complete synchronicity, then return to glare at each other. Stop stealing my line. And lastly, Aoi from Kurigakure vs Mary from Sunagakure in Arena 4. Aoi looked at Mary, who was studying him in turn, before nodding in greeting. In a while. He greeted her. 3 years. When Lady May came to form an alliance with us. Mary nodded. You still owe me a drink for winning that bet. You snooze, you lose. Aoi answered. Let the 5th round begin. Nagenda announced. Arena 1, Shikamaru and Lady Oda remained still, studying each other, gauging their strengths and weaknesses and Shikamaru reading her body language, smirking when he realized something. Reaching back, he saw Lady Oda tense until she saw him pull out a bag of chips and start eating them. Shikamaru stopped for a moment when he heard her stomach roar, wanting to be fed. Want some? He asked, seeing her hold her stomach whilst blushing. Come and get it. Gritting her teeth and grabbing her kanabo, Lady Oda did just that and Shikamaru realized that he might have underestimated her. She literally danced through the wind at a speed that caught him by surprise. Sure enough, he learned why didn't want to be hit by her club. It hurt about as much as his mother's dreaded frying pan, if not considerably more so. Really? Jalapeno flavor? She asked, sniffing the chips before chewing on a handful, looking down at Shikamaru in disdain. Isn't that a bit hot? Shikamaru asked. Those chips had the hottest flavor he could handle. My family eats ghost peppers for breakfast, reapers for lunch and devil chilies for supper. Something like this is nothing. She said, lifting another handful of chips to her mouth and froze there. Hajime no Jutsu, success. Shikamaru said from his position on the ground, his shadow linked up with hers only 5 feet away. What is this? Lady Oda asked, unable to move. My family's secret technique. It is too troublesome to explain, so I'll have you leave the arena. Shikamaru said, still lying on the floor and controlling her movements as she walked to the edge, then over it. It is too troublesome to get up and give myself more pain than I already have, plus the clouds are nice to look at right now. He muttered. Winner, the lazy little shit from Konoha. Riza announced. Now get your arse to the seats before I have Lady Oda bat you over there. Arena 2. Eri, unlike Shikamaru and his opponent, immediately began running through hand signs. Ranton. Laser circuit, he said, sending laser beams at his opponent, who either dodged or blocked the beams with a wind barrier. Arifer, she shouted in response, sending a windstorm at him in return, before engaging him in a sword fight. What a drab. Guess I can't ask you to resign, can I? Dari asked. Sorry, but no. There are only 2 people in the world who can make me resign during a duel, my husband and the Emperor. She answered. Dari blinked. So your husband isn't henpecked? He must have a nice life indeed. He asked. And the Emperor? 1. My husband knows what he wants and is willing to go to great lengths to get it, but not at the expense of others' lives or property. She answered. And the Emperor is a friend of the family, you could say. My husband often invites him to go hunting during hunting season. Quietly she added under her breath, and the Empress can be scary if she wants to be, but Dari didn't hear that. Friends and family are important. Dari nodded, then saw Leonora smirk. On another point, get ready to lose. She said. Really? Dari asked. Yes. We've been blade locked for all about 20 seconds now and I could gather the wind around us. She said happily, making Dari realize his great mistake and jump away, going through hand signs as he went. Hayton. Endon, he immediately called, just as Leonora unleashed the blast of air she had gathered. The resulting explosion sent both of them flying in opposite directions, with Derry flying off the arena and Eleonora digging her sword into the ground just short of the edge, though she did dislocate her shoulder from the strain of her sudden deceleration. Winner by ring out, Eleonora Voltaria. Laxus announced. And can the medics come over here? Got burns and dislocations here. Arena 3. Nobody really understood what was going on here. Kiba and Haru started off with a verbal conflict, then began trying to murder each other, then paused to catch their breaths, got into another verbal clash, engaged each other, whilst continuing said verbal clash, paused again to catch their breaths, again, rinse and repeat. All the while, Mihik just stood there, eyebrow quirked, wondering why the hell they were arguing about whose style of sword combat was superior, when both of them were, essentially, using the exact same style without realizing it. A style that he analyzed and found to be lacking in its versatility as it was designed to be a single-target style. Your mother is a whore. Haru shouted. Yeah, well your sister screamed like one yesterday in bed. Kiba returned. And at this point Mihik was considering just killing the two of them. This was not what he signed up for. After a few more agonizing minutes for the former warlord, Kiba managed to get under Haru's swing and send a lightning-covered fist into his face, leaving him stunned enough to hold him at sword point. Winner, Kiba of Kiri. Mihik announced. Now, the two of you shut up about your stupid competition and be the friends you clearly are. We're not friends. The two snapped at him in perfect synchronism. Arena 4. Futen. Sandstorm Mary began, covering the arena in a smokescreen sand screen. Jotun. Lava bunch and Aoi whispered, spitting out some of his lava and creating a perfect replica, which took his place whilst he moved a few steps to the side as his clone was suddenly beset by Mary's binding cloth. In the stands. Why didn't he use Kaiten? Yukata asked. Because of the sand. May answered. Had he used a fire attack, the sand would have melted and turned into molten shrapnel, with a follow-up wind jutsu that. It is the reason why Aoi lost his eye during their first battle many years ago during a mission gone south. Why did the mission go south? Kankuro asked, before his eyes widened. It can't be. Indeed. My predecessor made a deal with your father during the Third Great War. Peace between Mizu and Kase for her head. May sighed. Not long after the treatise was signed, Yugura launched an amphibious assault on Kase no Kuni's most important trading port, and Mary-san hates Kiri for killing her sensei. Kankuro continued. So, when her team and Aoi's team encountered each other back then, indeed. It's also what made Aoi decide to defect to my fledgling resistance movement when he learned from Mary that Kiri betrayed them like that. May told him, returning her attention to the fight in the fourth arena. Back to the fight. Mary didn't let up on her attack once she realized that she'd caught a clone. She sent her cloth wiping around in an attempt to capture Aoi, who was proving himself to be quite elusive. All the while, Aoi was making more of his rubber balls a little bigger than tennis balls, but packing them full of explosive tags, flashbangs or smoke bombs, which he then rolled in Mary's general direction. After a long while, once she was surrounded by enough of them, he detonated the smoke first, forcing her to stop her attacks and use a wind jutsu to clear the air, just as Aoi detonated the flashbangs. Yet, Mary was not a jonin for nothing. The moment she felt the bright light sear her retina, she began covering herself in a dome with her binding cloth, whilst pulling out a storage seal and releasing all the water it held, drenching the cloth, just as the explosive tags within the remaining balls erupted in flame and broken floor tiles. She did curse herself however for having fallen for his trick, one she'd seen him use on other shinobi before during the last war, back when she was still a genin. She also had to hand it to the Mist Shinobi veteran. He didn't waste time. By the time her vision had cleared, he had already cut open her cloth dome and held a kunai across her throat and another one pointed at her back where her kidney was. Mary clicked her tongue but conceded her defeat. Winner, Aoi from Kurigakure. Makarov announced, to the cheers of everyone watching. Wendy, give this young lady a checkup. That much light must not have been comfortable for her. Humming, Master Makarov. Wendy said as she jogged over only to trip on a small stone and fall on her face. After a brief break during which the arenas were repaired, Najenda gave an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be holding the last set of battles for the first round. After lunch, we will be holding the second round. Now, for the next set of battles. She grabbed a pair of slips out of the box. Ara of Sunagakure and Keat of Nadeshiko. Please head on over to Arena 1. Najenda said, taking out another set of papers. Ara walked towards his arena whilst looking at his opponent. Keed was a short-haired girl wearing the classic Nadeshiko uniform, with the exception of a pair of bladed tonfa strapped to her waist and a certain green book sticking out of her tools pouch. You read that crap? He asked, pointing at the book. It's not crap. It's fine literature. Keed countered. I'd know. I've read the entire series multiple times. Only prudes don't read these pieces of art. Ara, beneath the sand armor, felt his eyebrow twitch. In the stands, Tamari was radiating fury whilst Kankuro was making himself small, remembering the time when his sister found his own, now former, collection. He thought that Gaara before Naruto kicked his ass was scary compared to Tamari that day. He'd rather deal with crazy, psychopath, homicidal, screw-loose, short-tempered Gaara any day of the year. Jin from Iwagakure and Shiro of Nadeshiko, Arena 2. Nagenda called out. Jin was a grey brown-haired muscular old man who wore a sleeveless variant of the standard Iwa uniform. Both of his arms were covered in tribal-like tattoos. Shiro on the other hand looked like a cross between Might Guy and Hinata. Her short-sleeved uniform barely held in her slightly above-average rack, but did nothing to hide the sheer defined muscle of her limbs, denoting her as a taijutsu specialist. Her hair was a similar shade of black-blue hair as Hinata. In essence, she was comparable in size to Hinata, but with Guy's muscles, comparatively to body size. And to complete the odd look, she had a pair of trench knives holstered to her hips. And that is also where the danger flags began. Anyway, Ido of the West and Asumi of Iwagakure, Arena 3. Nagenda announced. Asumi wore a variation of the Iwa uniform that resembled Kurenai's outfit, her short hair pointing in every direction and her blue eyes seemingly drilling into anyone's soul. Ido was a green-gray-haired man wearing samurai armor, holding a long pipe and casually smoking away and looking high as heck. "What's wrong with you?" Asumi asked, looking at the cook samurai with a twitching eyebrow. Noting. Ido answered, taking another deep drag from his pipe. "Just wondering why there are two of you." But the other Western samurai, "Alright, we destroyed all his stashes last week and killed all his suppliers. So how in the name of all that is holy did he get more tobacco and opium?" Oda asked. "How should we know?" One of the other samurai. "He must have found a new supplier here in the capital. At least he is manageable, even when high." Another samurai muttered. "And at least he isn't drunk." Back with Nagenda. "And well, we have only 2 people left, they can go to Arena 4. What were their names again?" Nagenda asked, grabbing the last 2 slips. "Kari of Kumagakure and Renji of Tetsu no Kuni. Let's get this over with." Kari said, with the Tetsu samurai nodding in agreement. Renji was a black-haired man with steel blue eyes walking with a slight limp. "If you don't mind me asking, but what the hell happened for you to have a limp?" Kari asked. "About a month ago, I made the misfortune of encountering a certain pink-haired walking blackboard from Konoha whilst on a pilgrimage to the main Shinto shrine in Hai no Kuni," he answered. "Made the near-fatal mistake of mistaking her for a guy. She certainly acted like one. But the Konoha delegation." Sakura clenched her teeth and growled, remembering that encounter. Worse still, it had made her Sasu-kun chuckle a bit at her expense. "I should have broken more than his leg back then," she hissed out. Back with Kari and Renji. Kari snickered. "You talking about that one there? The one that is glaring kunai at you?" Renji looked and nodded. "Indeed, that's her. I see that she still looks like an effeminate guy." He then cupped his hands to his mouth and called out to Sakura, "An effeminate guy who lost to a child during the very first preliminary round. A child, for God's sake." Short flashback. Sakura groaned as she was extracted from the concrete wall she had found herself in. Her opponent was a small brat, looking no more than 10 years old. Didn't matter though since the little shit bitch slapped her, sending her flying into this damned wall, burying her up to her waist in it. If it was any consolidation, the little brat lost to Sasuke the next round, but not before revealing that he was actually an adult with a growth disability, although only a few people believed him. Flashback end. Barry snickered whilst the crowds laughed at Sakura's expense. The two then heard Nagenda announce the start of the matches. Arena 1. Liza brought her hand down and was instantly almost crushed by the literal avalanche of sand that erupted from behind Gaara, bearing down on Keed, who immediately jumped back and sent a barrage of water orbs at the approaching sand. Beneath his sand armor, Gaara smirked. His distraction had worked. Suddenly, Keed was ensnared by a tendril of sand that appeared from below her, wrapping itself around her arms and torso, then pulling down, forcing her to her knees as more and more sand converged around her, eventually covering her from neck to toes. "Surrender, unless you want me to break your bones," Gaara ordered. Never Keed began, but then let out a pained cry as Gaara crushed one of her hands, Riza flinching from the sound of crunching bones. Alright, I give. "Winner by forfeit, Gaara from Sunagakure," Riza announced. "Medics, we have a busted hand and arm here." Arena 2. Jin learned 3 lessons during his fight with Shiro. Lessons he probably should have learned years ago. Not in order. Lesson number 1. Don't underestimate a girl who looks like she can knock your block off. Lesson number 2. Don't brag about having beaten, raped and murdered an Adashiko Kunoichi during the last war. That Kunoichi may have been, let's say, Shiro's mother. Lesson number 3. Don't call any woman ugly simply because she doesn't fit your criteria of what is beautiful and what isn't. Granted, his type was essentially purely housewife material, not experienced Kunoichi, but still. And on to how he learned these very important lessons. Lesson number 1. Barely 3 seconds after claiming that the fight will be a cakewalk, after Laxus started the match, he found himself with a black eye, 2 missing teeth and a dislocated arm from a multi-hit combo she delivered on him. Lesson number 2. Before claiming that the fight will be a cakewalk, he boasted about his conquest to her about the last Nadeshiko Kunoichi he had faced in battle, and what followed next was the aforementioned beating he received for lesson 1 above. Lesson number 3. After coming back to his senses, he insulted her, calling her things like a disgrace to all females in existence for not being a housewife, resulting in her giving him an eerie smile. Not a housewife, is it? And what exactly do housewives in your dumb imagination use? She asked, subtly removing a scroll from her pouch. Pots, pans and other cooking and household utensils. Jin answered, too angry to notice the danger. Pans like this? Shiro said, having quickly looked through the scroll until she found the correct seal. In her hands appeared a ridiculously large frying pan. Jin wouldn't return to active service for a year and would flinch whenever he saw his wife so much as touched any kitchen utensil. Winner, Shiro of Nadeshiko. Laxus announced, before beginning to sweat slightly. Someone should have warned him about blabbering like that beforehand. Shizuka commented. I agree, however he is a staunchly loyal Jonin War veteran. It's a pity he didn't get a chance to show of his true potential. He has all sorts of hidden gimmicks hidden around his persona. Kuritsuchi said. And why is your subordinate looking at the proctor like he is a prime steak grilled medium rare? Shizuka shook her head. She just found someone who fits the criteria we Nadeshiko Kunoichi look for when hunting for our husbands. Single, attractive and powerful. Off in the stands, a certain white-haired S-class mage felt more than a little twitch in her eyebrows seeing Shiro's actions. Arena 3. Mihik sighed. He knew Ido only in passing and was vaguely interested in his unique brand of swordsmanship, somehow managing to invent the drunken sword style. Like the name suggests, it is similar to the drunken fist style of Taijutsu, only for Kenjutsu. But Ido wasn't drunk right now, so the Iwa Kunoichi was holding her own against the slightly older male, who half the time swung completely wide, telling her to stop swapping places with her doppelganger. That does not mean that she was having it easy though. Thus far she had only been able to land a few glancing blows as, despite being as high as the clouds, Ido was still as nimble as a certain big fat lazy panda dodging cannonballs whilst standing on a floating piece of debris. Hold up. He suddenly said. I'm getting thirsty. Before taking a few swigs from the gourd on his belt. Up in the stands, well there he goes. One Western samurai said, shaking his head in defeat. Odds above, he will be insufferable once the alcohol wears off. Another samurai on the other side of Oda commented. I wouldn't be so sure yet. That young lady also seems to have an ace up her sleeve. Oda said, pointing at Asumi's hands which were stealthily going through several hand seals. Back with the fighters. Alrighty then, come on then all three of you. Ido said, swaying from side to side, pointing his sword either directly at her or a bit to either side of her. You know, it is good that these arenas are this small. Asumi said. Doten. Her Inazumi no Kaisei, hedgehog formation. All around her, the ground suddenly erupted with numerous stone spikes that spread out across the arena floor, making Ido jump back and be forced into a corner. And Asumi wasn't finished yet either. Raiden. Raijin no Kekai, she said as electricity leapt from her to one of the spikes, then another and another, all of which shot off to another spike, sometimes linking up with another mass of electricity, other times splitting up into 2 or more charges. Ido, despite his state of mind, realized that this combination of techniques was bad business. Especially when all that electricity suddenly accelerated straight for him. Lightning strike, he said, cutting the first electrical strike, dodging the second, and being hit by the third and following strikes, because Asumi had burrowed underground and grabbed his right ankle, A, preventing him from moving and B, distracting him from the real attack. Winner, Asumi of Iowa. Mihik announced moments before Asumi cried out in pain as she felt the muscle on her forearm having been nearly severed by Ido's final strike when he tried to cut of her arm in order to regain his mobility. Medics. We have a priority 1 here. He called out, seeing that her primary artery had been cut. Arena 4. You are not going to use ninjutsu, are you? Renji asked. Kairi shook her head. Unlike most shinobi, I take pride in my kenjutsu skills. And it isn't often that I get to engage in a duel with a fellow kenjutsu specialist or a practitioner of Bushido. Using ninjutsu would hurt my pride. Renji nodded, secretly relieved. He did not want to be on the opposing side of another ninjutsu barrage. Been there, done that, never want to do that again kind of thing, you know. You may begin. Makarov announced. For a moment, neither side moved, with the one sizing up the other. Then both of them moved. With a loud clang, their swords met. The crowds cheered as the two of them seemingly danced around the arena. Even Kakashi was surprised at the prowess these two showed. And Sasuke was pissed because there was some sort of barrier around the arenas that prevented him from copying their techniques. Well, not that he was smart enough to realize there was a barrier. The Sharingan can only see chakra constructs after all, something that Rimuru doesn't have. After a while the two combatants disengaged. After the tournament, we should spar more often. Renji said. If it helps improve the frosty nature of Utetsu Samurai, why not? Carrie commented. I mean, you all come from that ice palace you call a country. Shut up. At least we only have a frosty nature. Renji countered. Which is still better than Konoha's so-called Kunoichi with a burning temper. He roared towards a certain Pinkett. Carrie chuckled. If the situation allows, we should meet up more back home. Renji smirked. You happen to be my type, so why not? In the stands, Amoy heard this, then began to mutter his nonsense again, which was silenced by Lady Oda, who gave him a simple and easily understood ultimatum. Shut up or else. Whilst menacingly holding her kanabo in her hands. Reason? Well, for once, Amoy wasn't spouting end-of-world stuff. No, he was fretting that Carrie had just found her future husband and would burden him with the duty of babysitting their kids when they were out, then them dying and leaving him to look after their kids. All of which had made Lady Oda self-conscious about her still single status and the fact that she hadn't found anyone yet who caught her fancy. Back in the arena, the two combatants continued exchanging blows, their smiles growing with each engagement until Renji's injured leg became too much for him and disengaged, though Carrie didn't stop her assault and forced him to give ground until eventually he stepped out of bounds. Winner, Carrie of Kumo. Makarov announced as Carrie slung Renji's arm over her shoulder and helped him to the stands where the medics would look at his leg. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a 2-hour break for lunch, then the tournament will continue with the second round of battles. Najenda announced, and together with the 4 referees, turned to walk out of the stadium as the spectators stood to do the same. With Naruto, so, lil sis. Naruto began only to have Hanabi glare at him. I'm only 2 inches shorter than you, don't call me lil sis. She snapped, though her glare lost all its heat. Naruto chuckled. Sorry, but the nickname fits since you are my little sister-in-law. Hinata giggled behind her hand. Anyway, want to have lunch with us? Sorry, but I already have plans with Mogi, Yuden and Konohamaru. Hanabi answered. Konohamaru is here? Naruto asked, surprised. Hanabi nodded. My friendship with him is more through Mogi, but he's cute with how he tries and fails to woo Mogi, who clearly isn't interested in him in that way. Oh, is that a crush I hear in your voice? Hinata asked. No comment. Hanabi answered, looking kinda-red as she turned her face away from them. Now, I gotta go find Mogi, and the others. She turned on her by Byakugan, blinked in surprise, then whispered something into Hinata's ear, which left Hinata looking stunned. See you two later, Nai-san, Wani-sama. Naruto blinked, then turned to look at Hinata, who was still frozen. What did she tell you? He asked. So Naruto turned to his wife with a questioning look as they sat down at the table in the small restaurant, the Gentle Breeze. It was a homely little joint away from the hustle and bustle of the main streets, roads and avenues where the majority of the city's populace are usually. Despite this, it has a large group of dedicated clientele that keep the shop open, the royal family being amongst this group. What did Lulsis tell you that has kept you so quiet till now? I am not sure if I should tell you or not, Hinata answered, twiddling her fingers. Come on. Naruto told her with smile. Whose big secret is it? Hinata sighed. You'll probably find out soon anyway, but when Hanabi was looking for Mogi-san, she spotted Niji and Karen having an intimate moment. Naruto looked at her blankly. He does know that Karen and Taiya pretty much share everything, right? He commented, referring to the fact that the two Ritids have been in an on and off relationship ever since Karen joined their little group back in Kawa no Kuni. Those two were basically inseparable and even roomed together. Had Naruto known better, he probably wouldn't have made a cheesy comment about them ending up sharing a husband later on in life. A comment that got him a week's worth running for his life from 2 angry girls, one of whom, wheelchair be damned, was going to, quote, rip of your dick and shove it up your ass so far you can taste it in your mouth. End quote. Oh, I am sure that Taiya doesn't know yet she was complaining about Niji again during our last girls' day out. Hinata said, before narrowing her eyes. So that is why Karen was so quiet that day, Naruto. She looked around, looking for her husband who seemingly had just disappeared. Hinata was about to activate her Byakugan when a loud "they what?" echoed through the streets of Midgard, and Hinata couldn't help but shake her head and smile at the chaos that Naruto had just unleashed onto their city. In the meantime, she would look for Niji to witness the fallout. With Naruto, moments earlier, Naruto found Taiya at her usual place in the main square, giving music lessons to street urchins and orphans, something she does when not spending time with her friends, Naruto and Ko and some others, or is performing on stage or chazzing people around who simply wanted to ask her for her hand in marriage. Good day, Lord Emperor. The kids greeted in chorus. Good day, young ones. May I speak with Taiya, please? He asked the kids, making Taiya lightly glare at him since he made it sound she was theirs to share. But hey, they're kids. The kids nodded and left the two to talk. What you need? Taiya asked. Niji and Karen were making out earlier. Naruto told her bluntly, then prepared for the storm. He wasn't disappointed. What Taya screamed, her hair flaying around in anger. I am sure that Karen will share him with you. Naruto said smoothly, making Taya freeze, and Naruto could have sworn he saw her cheeks flush for a moment. Take me to them now. She calmly told Naruto, who could see the Oni mask appear behind her. Not long after, Hinata, Naruto and Taya arrived in the tea garden at roughly the same time, and whilst Hinata hid behind some hedges with her ocular abilities active, Naruto walking over to his wife and Taya, casually walking up behind the two oblivious individuals sharing a pot of tea under the pavilion. Loudly clearing her throat, she got their attention, and Hinata held back a giggle at seeing all color drain from their faces. I have heard over the bloody wind that someone hasn't informed me of certain developments. Taya started, making the couple look at each other with flushed faces. Teu, I can explain, Karen began, but was interrupted by Taya. You can explain later after answering one question. Taya looked them both in the eyes, neither one being able to keep it for long. Mind if we share him? I guess that is one way to get into a relationship. Naruto commented to Hinata, who was still giggling. Let's give them some space. We can ask them all about it later. Hinata said between giggles. I'll cook some ramen for lunch. Now that got Naruto's full attention. 2 hours later, arena. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second round of battles. Najenda spoke into the microphone, earning cheers from the crowd. We will be keeping the same format as last round, 4 battles apiece. She continued. In Arena 1, Koyo from Tetsu no Kuni and Monkey D. Luffy. In Arena 2, Natsu Dragneel and Carry from Kumagakure. In Arena 3, A from Kumagakure, Mifune from Tetsu no Kuni and Irachi of the West. In Arena 4, Might Guy from Konohagakure and Legolas Greenleaf of the Elven Realm. 1. As the 9 contestants made their way to their arenas, the 4 referees shuffled their locations. Now, it was Makarov at Arena 1, Riza at Arena 2, Laxus at Arena 3 and Mihik at Arena 4. In Arena 1, Makarov looks at Koyo and at Luffy. Both contestants ready? He asked, getting nods in return. Well, a nod and a huge smile from Luffy. Begin. Shishishishi. I hope you are a better fighter than that girl from last time. No comment. Koyo responded. I prefer not to make such judgments on people who lost due to unknown abilities. My last opponent, Ryu, just didn't have the experience for fighting fast opponents, but he did well enough. That's good. Luffy said before sending a hockey-enhanced fist straight for Koyo's face. Sidestepping to the side, Koyo discovered with a frown that his katana bounced harmlessly of the now black skin that covered most of Luffy's forearm. So instead he did the next logical thing in his opinion. Charge. Getting in close, he started attacking Luffy with everything he had, but Luffy dodged and weaved through the dance of steel, all the while extending his arms behind him. Gomu Gomu no. Well, my time in this world was short but beautiful, Koyo thought, hearing Luffy. Bazooka. Sure enough, Koyo was sent flying, his armor broken to pieces, and his ribs cracked. Fortunately, Luffy had enough brain cells to send him flying towards the medics. Makarov meanwhile quirked an eyebrow at Luffy. Observation hockey. And armament hockey. Wasn't that a tad overkill? He wanted a challenge. Luffy commented. Makarov sighed and declared the Pirate Navy captain the winner. Now, where's the meat? Arena 2. Perry was finding new definitions for the term bullshit. No, seriously, this salmon head eats fire and lightning. And follows up his snack by indiscriminately burning everything within close proximity to her. Proctor, what bullshit is this? She asked Riza. That would be called indiscriminate firepower. Riza answered in her usual blunt attitude. Oh, and better watch out. He uses lightning as well. What was all Carrie could say before she was engulfed in an electrified inferno. Natsu? Natsu cut of his flames and looked towards where his guildmates were sitting. How many times have we told you to hold back when fighting a girl? I am holding back. He shouted back. I haven't moved from this spot since the fight began. Even from where he stood, he could see Lisana and Lucy facepalming, whilst Gagiel standing next to them nodded in complete agreement with Natsu's statement. After all, Natsu hadn't gone in for melee combat. Winner, Natsu Dragneel. Riza announced as she saw the burnt form of Carrie lying on the floor. Medics, got a priority too here. Major burns and unresponsive. Meanwhile, off in the Nadeshiko section, a certain Kunoichi whimpered in fear, remembering her very recent trauma. Arena 3. Laxus would never have believed it. In a shocking turn of events, the moment he started the match, A was engulfed in lightning, blitzed over to Irachi, who was unprepared for the sheer speed the large man moved at, lariated him off the arena floor, then began indiscriminately attacking Mifune using various lightning techniques, which earned him a number of deep cuts, especially on his arms and one on his neck, but he eventually was able to land a deciding blow that sent the leader of the Eastern Samurai sliding off the arena. He would later, whilst in a discussion with his closest subordinates, confess that had there not been a size limit on the arena, Mifune could have defeated him since the old samurai had turned the fight into a battle of attrition and A's techniques drain a lot of chakra. And, quote, that damned sword style of his is so log-damned annoying. Arena 4, Legolas had come to a startling conclusion. He underestimated the Eastern warriors. Granted, he had easily won against that overthinking samurai from Tetsu, and yes, he rarely ever got to fight anyone from that continent, but still, he had become overconfident. Because he was once again learning what it meant to be punched in the face by someone who has the strength of an angry dwarf, agility that rivals, if not surpasses his own, a brutal fighting style that hurt a lot, and all this before he opened something called the fourth gate. Off to the side, Makarov winced at the barrage of punches and kicks that Might Guy was delivering upon the elven prince. Amended meaning. He winced at the sound of cracking ribs, flying teeth and the black eye that Legolas ended up with. Winner, Might Guy of Konoha. He called out just as Guy was about to deliver a right hook, stopping a few inches from Legolas' face. Forgive me, Prince, but he outclassed you there. Hardly agree with you, fear, Legolas said through his missing front teeth as Guy held him up and over to the rushing medics. With Naruto and Hinata. So, where is the real you? Hinata asked Naruto. The boss is busy snacking on popcorn and ginger beer over there with Konohamaru and his merry gang. The now revealed shadow clone pointed at some location in the stands near where the Konoha delegation stood. Also, that rude agent who snuck away from the delegation shortly after arriving. He just tried to break into the royal palace. Skull and the rest of the Empress's guard caught him whilst he broke through the window into their changing room. I am assuming he won't survive long enough to interrogate. Hinata shook her head. Wait, how do you know this? One of the paperwork clones popped after they heard the feminine roars of fury coming from that side of the palace, and a second one popped after one of Skull's lieutenants came to report what happened and then quickly left to join in on the beating. The clone answered. And Siri? Hinata asked. Last I heard, she's getting a specialist to help clean up the mess. Came the answer. Remind me to bake a large cake for the wolf school. Hinata commented. Ara, what did the real you do to make my sister that red-faced? Moments earlier, with the real Naruto. So, how have things been for you, boss? Konohamaru asked, eating popcorn while seeing that girl from Kumo being roasted. All things considered, busy. Naruto responded, before holding his pack of popcorn to Yuden and Miyogi, who gladly took some, whilst Hanabi was nabbing some from Konohamaru. After the war, reconstruction began. Hinata and I haven't had a chance to take a few days off since our honeymoon a few years ago. What's it like, being married? Konohamaru asked, not seeing Hanabi freeze momentarily and gaining a small blush. That is something best reserved to be experienced firsthand. Naruto told him with a smirk. In other words, you just don't want to talk about it? Hanabi asked. That bad, huh? Naruto quirked an eyebrow at her. I seem to recall you asking that same question to Hinata via letters a few months ago. And Hiashi Otu sent stating in his letter to give you the same answer as I just gave Konohamaru. Mogi, Yuden and Konohamaru giggled at Hanabi, whose cheeks were colored a bright red. Damn older siblings and father, she grumbled out under her breath, not finding anything to refute the statement. Anyway, Konohamaru. Naruto began. Have you found any girl you like yet? Nope. Konohamaru answered. Too busy being chased by fangirls who want me for being a clan heir. You told us you had it under control. Mogi and Yuden commented. That was the civilian group. I am talking about the rest of our grade's girls. Apart from you and Hanabi-chan, all the girls from our grade are horny fangirls. Konohamaru sighed. Hey, they aren't that bad. Mogi snapped, with Hanabi nodding in agreement. When you last spoke with them, what was the main topic they spoke about? Konohamaru asked them with a deadpan expression. Neither girl wanted to answer it because they knew that he was right. Iruka-sensei did say something about our class's female population being worse than Naruto's generation, Mogi thought to herself. How would you know this? Hanabi asked. Boss's famous prank henge. Konohamaru responded. Got my mom to lend me a few of her old clothes. Wanted to prank them, but got dragged into a BBQ restaurant by some civilian chatterboxes. Unfortunately, the booths next to us were occupied by the fan club and they spoke about nothing but finding ways to have their way with me. That bad, huh? Naruto hid a frown by taking a drink. Oh, cheer up, Konohamaru. I am sure that you'll find a young brunette firecracker somewhere near you that'll keep you feel happy and safe. He said with a smirk. A smirk that grew when he saw the red-faced glare that Hanabi sent him, whilst Konohamaru was sitting there clueless at the massive hint he had just dropped. Mogi and Yuden meanwhile were trying not to break out laughing. Back to the fights. Agenda walked forward again to announce the next matchups. Grabbing two slips, she announced, Shizuka of Nadeshiko and Shiro of Nadeshiko, please go to Arena 1. Izumi Curtis of the West and Gilmy, son of Gloin to Arena 2. Eleonora Voltaria of the West and Subaku no Gara from Sunagakur to Arena 3. Kuritsuchi of Iwagakure and Kankuro of Sunagakure to Arena 4. In Arena 1, may the best Kunoichi win, Shizuka-sama. Shiro said whilst giving her leader a salute. Agreed, Shiro-san. Shizuka responded. In Arena 2, this axe was passed down to me by my forebears. Gimli said, holding up his twin-sided axe. And this one was forged by mine father when I came of age. And I should be interested why exactly? Izumi asked, not really caring for the details. Because the last time one of my people sparred with you, and all the times before that as well, you destroyed family heirlooms and weapons tools that hold great significance to us dwarves. Gimli shouted, actually making her jump. I am asking you not to destroy mine weapons, unless you wish to be cut off from the good dwarven ale and meat you seem to be so fond of. No promises. Izumi said, outwardly calm, but inwardly cringing, thinking that she'd need a mug of ale to drown her sorrow of not scrapping another weapon today. Arena 3. Gaara stood on the arena floor, looking towards the entrance where he saw his white-haired opponent bickering with a pink-haired hunter, who seemed to be fretting about her arm, which was hanging limply at her side. Proctor-san. He turned to Mihik. What is going on with Eleonora-san? Mihik looked to Eleonora and Tiger. Oh, she dislocated her arm during the last round, and her husband is trying to dissuade her from competing, something about her arm not having been given time to heal. Gaara raised an eyebrow. Those two lovebirds fret over every small thing that happens to the other, including her sister wives, but when something happens to themselves, they don't give a damn. Mihik explained. At least young Tida isn't, never mind. Gaara turned just in time to see a young female with light chestnut hair drag Eleonora by her healthy arm back through the entrance, where a platinum blonde woman stood with a disapproving frown, whilst a team of doctors just stood there shaking their head before following the pair. Meanwhile, Tiger came jogging towards Arena 3 and informed Mihik and Gaara that Eleonora is withdrawing from the tournament due to her injuries, and added something about Tida and La Militia not allowing it either. Mihik looked at Gaara, who shrugged. Compliments on wanting to fight despite her injuries. Is she what they call henpecked? The Redhead asked. Mihik chuckled. You have no idea. He then spoke into a microphone. Winner by default, Gaara of Sunagakure. Arena 4. Makarov had always believed that people should be more honest with their opinions. Something that has definitely become the norm within his guild, especially Natsu and Gray, who honestly believed that action number COUGHBRAWLSANDFIGHTINGCOUGH number could solve any disagreements. And your home is colored like, have you seen your own architecture? Well, allow the old man to make an amendment to his beliefs. He'd prefer his brats to destroy the interior of the guild hall, rather than the verbal battle going on between the Suna puppeteer and the Iwa Kunoichi right now. Kids these days. Where did all the profanity come from? I'm getting too fucking old for this shit. The old guildmaster sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Seriously, where does the profanity come from? Arena 1. Shizuka and Shiro were engaged in a flurry of taijutsu, though to most watching, it looked like a well-practiced rehearsed dance, rather than a full-on fight. Some spectators who were focused on this particular fight even began clapping in rhythm with the pace of the fight. The two Kunoichi had sparred on a number of occasions back home, so they somewhat knew the fighting style of the other, leading them to duke it out almost in a battle of attrition. At least in theory. They were both fully aware of the looks they were receiving, especially from a certain raven duck-haired shinobi with a red eye infection from Konoha who was leering at them, probably planning on, somehow, convincing them to marry him and produce strong children for his clan, not realizing that he would most likely, definitely, die trying. A mere thought sent shivers up their spines. Besides, Shizuka still had to find and fight that Naruto fella. After all, if local tales speak true, then he has to be a powerful individual, worthy of her hand in marriage. Her village would definitely welcome him with open arms. Shiro flinched momentarily when she felt a pair of lavender eyes glare at them. No, not them at Shizuka, but she was close enough to be caught in the crossfire. In that moment, Shizuka grabbed her uniform and performed a classic over-shoulder throw, sending Shiro out of bounds, seemingly oblivious to whatever Shiro felt. Winner, Shizuka of Nadeshiko. Makarov announced as the winning Kunoichi helped her comrade to her feet, the two holding a whispered conversation as to why Shiro flinched like that. Apparently, Shizuka has quite a dangerous task ahead of her, or so Shiro explained. Off to the sides, Hinata turned away, frowning as the feeling of territorial infringement she had just felt disappeared. Naruto couldn't help but smirk as he looked at her. Arena 2. Izumi heeded Gimli's words concerning his weapons. No, really, she never touched them or came close to them, other than deflecting their trajectories with the back of her hands. All she did was transmute his armor into a solid piece of metal that made Gimli look like a rough but powerful warrior statue, albeit one with a moving and cursing head. Winner, Izumi Curtis. Riza sighed. She was glad that the Elric brothers didn't pick up her more troublesome tendencies, such as destroying anything they touch that vaguely irritates them. In the crowd of spectators, two blonde, yellow gold eyes males shivered, the one clutching his metal prosthetic leg, reliving some dark memories. Arena 3. Since his opponent was decided to forfeit, Gaara simply returned to his seat, though he wondered what said opponent was doing right now. With Leonora, and when told to rest and not strain your arm, we mean rest. And do not do shit. Tita was ending her tirade at Leonora, who had a lopsided smile as Militia took center stage with her lecture, with Ludmila and Sophia waiting their turn patiently. To the side stood Tiger, the sword rifle in his hands as he kept it away from Ellen. Arena 4. Both contestants immediately sprang back, Kankuro summoning his puppets, 5 of them, and Kuritsuchi going through some seals for a Yoten ninjutsu. Mihik didn't seem phased when the match ended soon after, Kankuro failing to dodge the widespread lava wave Kuritsuchi sent his way, and said Kanoichi not noticing one of Kankuso's puppets moving to her side, hidden by her arm and the lava she had spat out, and shooting several poison senbon into her leg. Well, she felt those at least. Whilst Kankuro was screaming in pain at having second and third degree burns on his side, Kuritsuchi began feeling woozy. Both collapsed at roughly the same time. Whilst this is a draw, neither contestant appears to be in any state to continue. Mihik said. With Naruto, what will you do about that Shizuka? Hinata asked. Talk with her. If that doesn't work, she's yours. Naruto answered. I don't know the rules in Nadeshiko concerning them challenging already married individuals or getting challenged by individuals of their own sex. Then we should ask Tiny Sage about that when we see him next. Hinata said, her voice carrying a dangerous undertone. Naruto nodded, then chuckled. You know he doesn't like it when you call him that. Well, it's not my fault he is compensating for something with his more recent crappy writing, Hinata said with a proud smile. He should have continued the writing style of the Tales of the Utterly Gutsy Ninja, instead of starting that itcha nonsense. This from someone who actually reads that stuff. Naruto teased, making Hinata blush vibrantly. Hey, it gives me ideas for our bedtime activities. She stammered. I never heard you complaining. Never said I was. Naruto simply responded, turning his attention back to the stage where an agenda listed out the next battles. Arena floor. Agenda drew 2 names from the bucket next to her, reading them out loud. The first contestants of the first battle for the last set of battles for the day are B of Kumagakure and Asumi from Iwagakure in Arena 1. She announced. She was about to grab another pair when an Iwa shinobi ran up to her and whispered something into her ear. Correction. Asumi of Iwa has chosen to forfeit due to the injuries sustained from her battle with Ido of the West. Nagenda announced. She then grabbed 2 more slips. Shikamaru of Konohagakure and Tamari of Sunagakure in Arena 2. She announced, making many shinobi from Suna and Konoha snort at the irony. Their second battle in as many tournaments in as many arenas. Berserker Naruka of the West and Hada Kakashi of Konohagakure in Arena 3. Nagenda continued. Kakashi looked at the whiskered blonde SHINOBIWARRIORSOLDIER, he wasn't sure what to think of her. He saw her fight with Chijuro. He decided that maybe it would be safe to keep his distance from her for the time being. Nagenda then spoke up. And that leaves Kiba from Kurigakure and Aoi from Kurigakure in Arena 4. The 2 Kiri shinobi looked at each other and nodded in mutual agreement. Arena 1. Man, what a drool, this is not cool. There's a saying I'm gonna grab, what a drab. B said, drawing circles into the ground. Was he ever going to find a worthy fight? B. Shut up with the lame raps. A shouted. And that is my line, what a drab. Derry added his own 2 cents. Arena 2. You better not pull of that stunt like you did last time, lazy ass. Tamari said. What will you do if I do? Shikamaru asked boredly. I doubt you can be more troublesome than mom. Oh, I have my means and ways I am sure I can be just as troublesome if not more so than your mom. Tamari said with a smirk. What could be more troublesome than my mom? Shikamaru asked, interested. Oh, I don't know, hook you up with a girlfriend, one that your mom will approve of. Tamari said with an evil grin, twinkling eye included. Like you? Shikamaru asked, turning the tables on her. My Kasan kept on bitching to me about how I forfeited to you and nearly made my father invite you over for dinner had you and Itagakure not invaded and killed her favorite deer. Shikamaru sighed. It's troublesome, but she really still holds a grudge against you for that and has a heavy skillet ready to beat you into the ground with. Will you 2 stop flirting and kiss already? Riza asked. I swear, you are worse than Edward and Winry when the general and I come over for a cup of tea, she muttered, making the 2 shinobi blink, look at each other, then pointedly find the ground more interesting as they fought to get their blushes under control. Arena 3. Kakashi studies Naruka out from the corner of his eye whilst reading a certain little green book. Judging by the muscles of her arms and her stomach, she is a strength-type fighter. He thought. And definitely strong enough to break a few bones if I allow her punches to connect, to quote the Nara clan. How troublesome. Hey, old man. Naruka spoke up, making him gain a tick mark. Stop checking me out. I don't have a thing for weak lazy old perverts. Precariat is Kakashi thought, the reasonable adult in him willingly stepping aside for the non-reasonable adult to take over. Or at the very least, Konoha hid into Jutsuugi. Raiden. Senengarashi. Hey, Sparky, how far can I bury his ass in the ground? Naruto asked Laxus. Deep enough that he survives, but not deep enough to we can't dig him back out. Laxus responded. Alright. I'll send him all the way to bedrock. Naruto said with a smirk, cracking her knuckles. Laxus eyed. Naruto never really listened to anyone other than Naruto and their family. Arena 4. May the best Kirinin win. Ow, I don't know. Kiba said, holding out a hand. Ow, I nodded and shook it. With Naruto and Hinata, who do you think will win these matches? Hinata asked. Between Shika and Tamari, it will be difficult to say. Unlike during the Chunin exams, there are no trees or walls there to give the lazy ass any additional shadows to use for his technique, so Tamari definitely has the advantage, but then again, if he is anything like back then, he has at least 6 plans ready and another 12 ready to pull out of his ass. Naruto answered. Hinata giggled. That definitely sounds like Shikamaru-san. And do you think we can do something about the tension between those two? Sure, just send a message to Shika's mother and to Gaara, make things extra troublesome for Konoha and especially the Nara clan. Naruto smirked. I am sure that Mrs. Nara will be happy that her son has a girl he likes and will want to meet her, origins notwithstanding. Hinata just shook her head with a smile. As for Naruto and Kakashi, Naruto is going to win this, hands down. I guess that we should have had someone warn Kakashi that Naruto is the leader of the Western Amazon Brigade, he said with a smirk. Those ladies are deadly, as you know. And short-tempered Hinata commented, remembering the third to last nation to have peacefully joined the empire with some concessions mind you. Sure, they have unrestricted traveling rights within the empire, but at least they are forbidden from challenging married men for their hand in marriage. They nearly went to war over that, until Naruto explained to them that he was happily married and did not want to constantly have women hounding him day and night. Then asked them if they were happy sharing after Hinata glared them into submission. Grudgingly, they conceded. Down amongst the arenas, match begin. Laxus, Mihik and Riza called out and Laxus had to turn into lightning to avoid the ensuing shrapnel. Arena 2. Tamari, remembering last time, immediately opened her fan all the way and bit her finger. Shikamaru lazily threw a flashbang behind him, the strong light extending his shadow because he was too lazy to do it himself. Tamari growled, actually growled, and dogs and cats within several city blocks of the Colosseum ran for their lives as they heard the dangerous sound, the rats and mice running after them in fear, making several alcoholics witnessing the spectacle of rodents seemingly chasing cats which in turn are seemingly chasing dogs who were running for their lives. Many of those people took their bottles and poured them down the drain, thinking that they had had a bit too much to drink. You caught me again, for fuck's sake. Tamari shouted. Language. There are small kids amongst the spectators. Shikamaru said. Anyway, I forfeit. He said. Hatamari and Riza asked. If I were to win this, I'd have to deal with the likes of the 4 Road Raikage, the 5th Kazukiage, Guy Sensei, and who knows what class of monsters the other winners thus far are. No thanks. Much too troublesome. Shikamaru said. I just promised my mom that I'd make it to the second round. Tamari stomped over to him, grabbing his collar and holding him close. Listen here, you lazy piece of shit, I warned. She didn't finish the sentence as Riza had moments earlier sent a pleading look at Izumi Curtis, who understood the silent question, and alchemically raised the ground underneath Tamari's back foot, sending her tumbling forwards and into Shikamaru, making them kiss. Welp, you heard the lazy guy. Winner is Tamari of Sunagakur. Riza announced. And though he may not get the first prize, he definitely got the girl. This got many catcalls from the crowd as Tamari began chasing Shikamaru around the arena. And they already have couple spats. They sure work fast. To add to the fun, Shikaku in the stands was taking a video of the whole ordeal, chuckling as he remembered when he and his wife got together swap out Riza for his own father, the Suna girl for Nara civilian, and the arena for a meadow in the Nara forest, and the tournament for the first meeting between him and his wife, after learning that their parents had signed them up to be married, and history might have repeated itself almost scene for scene. Arena 3. Laxus had barely finished saying the words when Naruto exploded in a dense mass of chakra, screaming berserker. Kakashi was shocked enough that he shielded his face with his book, not the other way around as he was wont to do. OSH, he began before dodging a punch from Naruto that shattered the entire arena, sending debris flying everywhere, only to be stopped by the barrier surrounding the arena itself. Such strength. Naruto turned towards him, mouth seemingly full of sharp teeth, her long spiky hair giving her an animalistic aura, her eyes glowing, yes glowing, red, and steam seemingly exiting her mouth as she gave a sharp exhale. With an animalistic roar, she threw herself at him again. Grabbing her arm, expecting to throw her over his shoulder and out of bounds, Kakashi realized that A. She was far stronger than he anticipated. B. He had no chance in CQC against her sheer strength. C. She was sprouting those chains of hers from her back this time. D. He fucked up by not making a clone in that moment. As Naruto sped past him, the chains wrapped around him and the ground, keeping her from flying out of bounds, whilst at the same time suppressing Kakashi's chakra and, with a helping tug from Naruto, sending him flying right at her, mailed fist cocked and ready for the punchline, should there be one. This is going to hurt. Kakashi told himself before being buried in a foot of concrete. Aauuu, he groaned. She hits as hard as guy with 3 gates open, he thought, his head spinning as Naruto reared back another punch, sending him further into the ground and into a world of pain. The third punch brought Kakashi blissful unconsciousness, whilst the fourth was stopped when Naruto, still in disguise, caught her arm moments before she hit Kakashi again. In the background, Laxus was naming her the victor whilst calling for the medics, saying there's a priority 1 here. Calm yourself, little sis. Naruto said, slowly embracing the still berserk but motionless Naruto. Slowly, the chakra around her began to calm down and return to her body, the chains beginning to fade away, her eyes returning to the vibrant color they usually were, as she slowly began to return the embrace, crying into his shoulder, happy that he was always there to bring her back. With the cages, is it wise to leave such an unstable weapon roaming freely? Danzo asked the Western attaché who was with them in to answer most of their questions. 1. She is not a weapon. He answered, his voice remaining calm, but his eyes burning with anger. She is the adopted little sister of our emperor, one of the few who can calm her down after entering the berserker stage. The attaché mellowed out. I was there when the emperor and his cousin rescued Naruto from some laboratory where she was tested on, where someone tried turning her into an emotionless weapon and instead created the woman you see before you. Many of the cages flinched, hearing that. Most of them, bar Danzo, detested the idea of human experimentation after all. You keep on calling him the emperor, does he not have a name to add to that? A family name or a title, Danzo asked, trying to eke some more information about the royal family that he could possibly use for leverage. You are awfully interested in information you don't need to know, Mr. Hokage. The attaché commented. But to answer your question, the emperor has many titles, but the one the population knows him by the best is the second unifier of the West. Second? Inoki asked. Indeed. Our emperor is the second emperor, the first one passing away due to illness a few years ago with no heirs, but proclaiming him as his successor. The attaché said with a smile. The current emperor was the first person to agree on the first stream of unification and later on became the second most well-known individual within the empire after the first, Emperor Kurikuma, himself. Danzo activated his hidden Sharingan. Surely there is more you could tell us about your emperor. He said, only to feel the point of a very sharp sword at his throat. Whatever power you were about to use to manipulate the attaché's mind, cease it immediately. Saoi demanded. Else you wish to spend your time here locked away in a cell. Danzo mentally glared at the Oni-Kijin, but complied. In Arena 4, upon hearing the start of the match, Kiba immediately rushed Aoi, knowing that he needed to gain an advantage over the more experienced shinobi quickly. Alas for the swordsman, Aoi knew this as well and engaged him wielding a tanto, both curing and enhancing their blades with lightning chakra. They exchanged blows for a short while until Aoi turned the ground beneath their feet into an elastic substance through the use of his unique lava release. The sudden uneasiness of the ground caused Kiba to miss Aoi and the elder shinobi to deliver a slash along Kiba's thigh, drawing blood. Kiba jumped a distance away and assessed the situation. Aoi had turned the field into an advantage to him, despite knowing that the technique he used ate a ton of chakra. Kiba was bleeding from his non-dominant thigh, but he was still relatively filled up. Nodding to himself, he decided to turn the match into one of attrition. Noticing that his opponent wouldn't attack again and thus realizing what Kiba was planning, Aoi cancelled his AoE jutsu from earlier and rushed Kiba. Sparks flew as their weapons clashed again. Those who watched the match grew to respect these two jonin as they both fought well. Neither allowed himself to be pushed into a corner and both fought with all they got. Eventually, the match ended with Aoi managing to land a kick on Kiba's wounded thigh, making the leg buckle and then holding his tanto to the swordsman's throat. Winner. Aoi of Kurigakure. Mihik announced. And please send a medic over here. One of these guys is close to being anemic. With Konohamaru and co. Well, guess that ends the fights for today. Konohamaru commented. And it looks like another speech is coming up. Mogi said, pointing to where the emperor and the empress at. Oh joy, another speech, Konohamaru muttered, shaking his head whilst Yuden and Mogi smirked whilst Hanabi thought, you'd pay attention if you knew who that actually is, with a smirk of her own. As they approached the railing, the stadium became quiet. Many have fought today in celebration of the peace and union that the Unification War has brought us. The emperor began. Let us all take the rest of the day to recover from the excitement and reconvene tomorrow for the next set of battles. The four of them joined the rest of the Konoha group as they left the Colosseum, Mogi and Yuden, suspiciously allowing Konohamaru and Hanabi to walk next to one another, much to the former's confusion and the latter's, not so, secret delight. "So, do you guys want to try out that restaurant near the hotel?" Konohamaru asked his friends. "Sorry, I'd like to lay down for a bit. Didn't drink enough because of the excitement." Mogi answered, giving Hanabi a small smirk. "I was invited to attend a math class in a nearby school later on." Yuden added his own excuse. "Don't worry. If the two of you like the food there, next time, the bill will be on me and Mogi." Konohamaru grumbled something about being ditched by his friends, whilst Hanabi was feeling a substantial amount of heat in her cheeks. "I guess it's just us then," Konohamaru sighed. "So, you up for some grub?" Hanabi didn't trust her voice to give a coherent answer and merely nodded, a small smile gracing her lips, leaving Konohamaru in a slight daze, though he quickly shook it off. "Must be this western sun," he thought.